Yeah, we should be good. Um, yeah, I started cursing less because my wife pointed out, she's like, there are like kids who probably watch you draw because you're drawing comics, like, and that was like a wake up call of like, oh yeah, I should watch my mouth. um, but on that note, everybody, this is the big draw. It's been a while since we did one of these. This is a friend of mine, David Erwin of Rennaisance Ministries. He has his own incredible YouTube channel that I think is going to blow up, where he talks about the paranormal, biblical lore, history, mythology, faith, mysteries, and cranberry farming. Which is like, I want to see what does the algorithm do with this guy. It's like they doesn't even know how to
Oh
handle.
man.
But yeah, Dave, please introduce yourself. And also, do you
Yeah,
prefer to be David or Dave?
either or, yeah. David works
Okay,
usually, but I got people at work that call me Dave, David, and
sure.
it's really either or is fine. Yeah, I mean, hopefully the algorithm would be good to me if I could get online and find the time to edit and make some more videos more often. I always tell myself that I'm going to get up really early in the morning at like 3:30, 4 a.m. and write out my scripts and grind away at some of the really interesting biblical stuff that I want to talk about. But it's like anything, it's hard to find the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's also, I mean, you're expecting a kid, right?
Yeah, yeah. My wife, we got about 3 months left, 2.5, 3 months until the baby's here. So we're really excited. Yeah, just gearing up and getting ready for that. Yeah, so we're very, very much stoked. Yeah, a little boy.
Oh my goodness! Congratulations, man. Oh, what's the name you got in mind?
We like the name Shepherd.
That's badass. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, Shepherd. We like that name a lot. So yeah, but yeah, we're definitely stoked. Yeah, just kind of getting the baby room ready and just thinking up stuff that we can buy and get, all that jazz.
Yeah, that's cool. That's got to be so fun and also a little bit anxiety inducing at the same time.
Yeah, we definitely are feeling ready. So I mean, I'm one of 8 children, so I grew up around a lot of siblings, a lot of babies, a lot of nephews and stuff like that. So it was definitely always an adventure. I think that sort of growing up in a big family like that really plays into being a bit of a eccentric thinker, because you're kind of always trying to find your niche, your interests, your things that kind of make you different, that stand out. So I think that really played into me
Yeah,
being a little bit of a oddball, I guess, in the way that I think and the way that I see the world.
yeah, and I think sometimes it's also like it's almost like so I really like this notion that I've heard from it's like something I think it relates to narrative therapy because my wife is a therapist and she talks about oh sorry, that's my alarm that I set to remind me that I was doing the big draw tonight because that's when we were doing it at 8, so it's like a 7:20 alarm. But yeah, this idea that people perceive life as a story,
Mm,
like that's how we process information in the world is like through narrative, which is why stories are so important because we even history
yeah.
everything. And it's also why advancements in science and mathematics and stuff, it's always more interesting when there's a narrative, a character narrative attached to it.
Mm,
The reason I bring that up is because this is some very horizontal thinking that led me to this, but the idea that when you have more siblings, it's almost like you have more of an opportunity to become an oddball because you almost perceive your family as an ensemble of characters. And if you have
right.
many people there, it's like there's many supporting personality types that are already represented.
Mm,
So if you
mm.
if you're like one of the younger kids, it's like, all right, well, we have like 3 different types of responsible people. We got this one. We got. I can just be interested in weird stuff, and you just like go off into this other.
Yeah.
At least that's how
Yeah.
it seems to me.
Yeah, no, well, I think that like what you're saying about these reviewing the world from a character-oriented aspect, really, it plays into like what we see within the Bible. One of my favorite Bible scholars of all time, Michael Heiser, he had said that the story is the story of humanity becoming essentially separated from God through our sin, through our you know, the wrongdoings that we've done in the past, and then kind of bringing us back into the fold, back into the family. So it's kind of archetypically similar to what you're talking about, like with a family, with perceiving the world through narratives, through stories. But if we think of, with the Adam and Eve story, God's children, kind of trying to get them back into the fold
Hmm.
through Christ, through his sacrifice on the cross, and kind of, playing into like the prodigal son story. That is the story of the whole Bible, is God bringing us back into the fold of the family. And that's what you get, this sort of continual narrative from Genesis all the way to Revelation of it starts in a garden. They're in a beautiful harmony with God, essentially. And then they fall out of that harmony, and then Christ comes and he rescues. He brings us back into the fold, back as his children. And then at the end of the book, all the way in Revelation, it ends with a garden imagery again, that we've been brought back into the Garden of Eden, essentially, in heaven.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what the Bible ends. It starts with a garden and it ends with a garden, because gardens in the ancient world are symbolic of absolute plenty, of not lacking anything. We as humans naturally understand that things are not as they ought to be. We understand intrinsically that we're missing something. I mean, that's why that's why people are essentially unhappy so often, is because they want life to be a different way. And what we're kind of playing out in our life stories is we're trying to find what life ought to be like. And I think that's what we're really seeing in the Garden of Eden, is we want this tranquil, peaceful, place of rest, and we can't get it. That's why
Yeah.
we look for it all in the wrong places. And I think, but like you said, if we can get our mind, our headspace in this place of understanding the narrative of the entire Bible from beginning to end, is God wanting to bring us back into that family, back into that restful original state. I think there's a lot of things that take the Bible from black and white into Technicolor.
Oh, that's a really interesting way to put it, bringing it into Technicolor. Well, there is, and what you're saying about the Bible, I think, is also true of history, is that when you really get further into history in general, there's a feeling that it's actually not that long ago, and that
Mm,
the information contained therein is actually very urgent.
mhm,
It's very relevant. Everything from the past is relevant now.
mm,
And yeah, that's interesting. I do like the idea of people talk about divinity and proof of a higher power, and people often use the argument of evil, of like, well, how can there be a God if evil exists? And it's like
mm.
something that the guy who wrote Imagine the Kingdom, I forgot his name. He was a guest on oh my god, what's it, the guy he wrote about near death experiences, but he was,
Oh,
wait,
yes.
what's his name?
Um, yeah, I'm trying to remember his
I
name
can't
right
believe
now.
I'm blanking on his name. Yeah.
He wrote "Imagine the God of Heaven."
Yeah, yes. And he said something that was interesting. He said, well, I mean, one could, if you're going to get philosophical about it, one could also make the argument, like, how do we have awareness of evil? like, how do we even
Right.
have awareness that things are not as they should be if we are purely evolutionary and we don't have a soul? Then
Yeah.
why would we not have simply adapted to tragedy? Like, why would a parent, like, I mean, this is me extrapolating off of what he said. Like, if you're just meat and bone and there's no aspect of you
Hmm.
that is divine, like, why would we not have evolved to the point where the loss of a child, for example,
Mm.
just makes you want to make another kid? Like, oh, we'll just do another one, because that's what,
Right.
like, if it was all about spread, like, but that's not what happens. It destroys people's lives.
Mm.
So like people sometimes they don't recover at all from that. So that's one of those discussions of like, I'm interested in that, this idea of that people, and this can even branch out past a religious discussion into a discussion of like human beings as they exist in the world, is that there is this awareness that the world is not as it's supposed to be, that
Mm.
things are supposed to be more just, they're supposed to be more kind.
Right.
And because
Well,
it's not just like I want to make the world better. It's like I would like to make the world as it should be, and that's a somewhat different impulse, you know.
right. Yeah, and I think too, like you said, there's no epistemic justification from a philosophical standpoint of things that are metaphysical, like love, like hate, like joy, consciousness, all of these things. If we are purely materialists, if we have a material paradigm, then you can't account for things that you can't put into a beaker, for testing. You can't, like you said, you can't put consciousness, you can't put thoughts, you can't put love into a beaker for testing. And so you then reduce human beings and animals and all of the beautiful things about reality, you reduce it all down to stardust crashing into other stardust. You essentially are taking, like you said, the divine away from everything. And you can't separate an ought from an is. Like science can explain how things are. They can explain, how the Earth, rotates on its axis, and it can explain gravitational pull and how a combustion engine works, but it can't explain why all these things ought to function or towards what end for what purpose. Those are all philosophical questions. Those are all metaphysical ideas, and so they're really to reduce everything down to a materialistic framework only. And the end of the day is absolutely I mean, it's meaningless. It becomes meaningless. Whatever sort of ethics that you try to have in 100 billion years from now, it'll be for naught, essentially, if there isn't something that's deeper to us, if we don't have souls.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, it's like I'm pretty forgiving of different viewpoints. It's like if somebody doesn't think human beings have a soul, I don't even know how we're going to communicate. you know, like
Right.
if somebody just thinks we're like that we're not even like an elevated species, like we are literally just apes that evolved into some, like you don't think there's something
Hmm.
intrinsically different about us at all. Like even if somebody can agree that there's such a thing as a soul in life, then we can deal. Like I can talk to them and we can actually have a really good
Mm.
time. But if somebody's like such a gross materialist that they think we are literally just supposed to like, wake up, take a shit, fuck, and then die, like I'm just like, well, I don't know. Like I don't know if I trust that
Hmm.
person because I don't know, like morally, like what's keeping you from, I don't know if I like philosophically, I don't know how I would yeah, how I would trust that this person is someone I could communicate with, or oh, we have someone in the chat. Hey, what's up, BB? This is Broken Blade. Oh, but before we go any further, I actually want to tell everybody how did you and I meet? It's kind of funny.
Well, we met at our mutual friend Dan's house on this lake that Dan and I both live at. You were up visiting from New York, right?
Yeah, I live in New York State, and from the country, and it's just funny because I think people like see that you have a YouTube channel and I have a YouTube channel and that we have similar interests, and they're like, oh, they must have connected through that. And it's actually really funny because Dan Warren is a friend of the channel who's been on many times, and I've only known him like a year, but he and I have gotten really close, and I think it's just because we joke that we like should have met each other when we were in middle school or something. But he invited me over, and both times I was sitting across from this guy Dave, who was his neighbor, and every time we would start talking, it would get into like really esoteric stuff. We're talking about like UFOs and Phil Schneider and stuff, and then I was
Yeah.
like, and then when you and I started texting, I think you mentioned in passing you had a YouTube channel, and I was like, and then I told Dan, I was like, you know Dave, his YouTube channel? And Dan was like, I had no idea that Dave had I think Dan, he was like, I didn't even know he had electricity.
Yeah.
Which is really funny because then I checked out your channel and I was like, oh, this is actually really good content. Like it's really well edited videos and you talk about really interesting stuff. And I think you have a pretty good screen presence. And I was like, I was pretty surprised that it takes a lot of humility to not bring that up all the time. You know what I mean? To like to have a YouTube channel that like looks as I think it looks pretty polished, and it looks like exactly the kind of channel that I could see getting like 100,000 subscribers in the
Oh,
next 2 years.
thank you. Yeah.
It has
Yeah.
that bearing.
Yeah, I feel like there's potential. I just need to put in I need to put in the work, the time, I got to upload, I got to write. I'm very meticulous about my writing. And so it ends up being, my script ends up being akin to something of like a college paper because I'm very uh, detailed and I don't want to get anything wrong. So I kind of research everything I'm going to say and then I double check everything. So that aspect of it can kind of cause me to have analysis paralysis sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I need to be a little bit more willing to like, go out there and get beat up a little bit, maybe say some things that might not be 100% true just for the sake of time, you know what I mean? Because I don't have a research team behind me, but it's been a kind of a dream of mine since I was probably like 17 or 16 to one day be able to make a full-time living off of something close to a YouTuber or film producer or something of that sort. So I think this right now is just kind of I'm sort of in a waiting period, kind of waiting for the energy to go all in, because I think when I do, it's going to take up a lot more time and energy than I originally thought.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And I'm new to the editing thing myself, because I don't know if you've seen any. I know you've seen a couple of my streams. I don't know if you've seen any of my edited videos, but like
Mhm.
I only learned how to edit like this past year, so my
They,
edits are still pretty rough.
I've seen them now. They look awesome. They're absolutely fantastic.
Oh, I appreciate that. I think honestly a lot of that is because I lean pretty heavily on the art. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
the visuals are taken care of because it's mostly just like professional artwork, and then I can just pick some non-copyrighted music and have some panning and some nice little cuts here and there. It's like if I had to edit like a video of myself looking into a camera like you do and have to have like a real setup that looks like a professional studio. Like you have a nice studio, like your lighting is good, the color balance and the green and the blue lights, it's fun. It's got like a little bit of a spooky atmosphere, but it's also cozy. It's all this stuff that people like. And I was like, man, that seems like so much freaking work.
Well, thanks. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing that kind of contributes to me not going full force with it yet is probably just because so much of that time was accumulating the stuff and sort of deciding what look I want stylistically. I mean, my entire life I've always been very much inspired by like archaeology and Indiana Jones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted it to feel a little bit like something of like Indiana Jones library.
Yeah, it's
But
cool. Yeah, I get that.
yeah, you'd be surprised though at how good you can make it one frame look, and then just how messy it is all around. So I wouldn't be too impressed if I was you.
Yeah. Well,
It's
there's
it's in the cellar of my house here, and it's a pretty small space. But just that corner and just that framing looks good. Everything else is a lot of my weights and just piled up stuff, Christmas decorations, things like that.
yeah. Well, I mean,
But I appreciate
we're
the encouragement.
we're not all red letter media. We don't have like full studios in like a warehouse like those guys. You know those
Yeah.
guys in Milwaukee?
Red Letter Media.
Yeah, they do like movie reviews and stuff, and they do skits, and they're really funny.
Hmm.
It's mostly just comedy for these like Milwaukee guys who just sit around and watch bad old movies and stuff. And but they must own a small studio because they have this whole warehouse with little sets that they can make for skits and stuff. And I'm like, how do you even? I mean, I guess it's cheaper out there.
Hmm.
But yeah, and that's the kind of thing where it's like you have to be getting such views to pay for that even.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah.
Oh, hey, what's up, Johnny? Yeah, so some of the regulars are coming in to my stream. Some of the human detritus that accompany my streams are here. That's right.
Yeah,
You heard me.
I learned how to kind of video edit and a bit about lighting. Most of the lighting aspect I learned just from watching YouTube and tutorials. I learned how to edit while I was at Bible College in Southern California.
Oh,
Yeah, so I kind of got on the editing team there, and I was editing some of the semester videos for them. and I would go rock climbing a lot. So I'd make rock climbing videos. It's actually a lot of my old videos on my channel are rock climbing and just vlogging and stuff like that. But now I'd like to be able to transition into making videos that I just need to stay in one spot for, so delving into the things that I'm interested in, which are mostly biblical stuff and things involving religion, and kind of I'd also like to make videos, maybe delving into aspects of the occult and stuff like that, just kind of esoteric things that a lot of people might find to be bizarre or different. My entire life, I've always been very much curious about and wondered why it is that certain people think this way or operate, on a different level or way that I do.
Yeah, it's true, and it is interesting because it's like that is the you and I pretty much bonded about this at dinner because also I apologize to everybody that my voice sounds like late Marlon Brando. It's I got just to an explanation. The reason that my face looks so gaunt and pale is because I got food poisoning a couple of nights ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, quick aside on that. We went to Massachusetts actually to see this beautiful gallery show, and we went to this Thai place, and I got this delicious mango duck dish, and immediately, like that night, was just a nauseous, pooping, farting, diarrhea mess, and it's been like 2 days of diarrhea that's slowing down, but all of the water has left my body, so I'm slowly rehydrating. So if I look like a raisin, that's why, everybody.
You're on the up.
Yeah, just wait.
That's good.
You just wait.
Wait, where in Massachusetts was it?
It was at the. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm blanking on this. I'm so tired. It was at the college, the gallery. It was. It was only an hour and a half from where we live in New York, so it wasn't anywhere near your area of Massachusetts. I
Okay.
actually
Yeah,
I
yeah.
told Dan because I was like, hey, if you have a couple of hours free, just drive up. And my wife was like, it's this gallery show is even further from where he lives than our house is. So I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
at least he'll know we're there. I forgot the name. It's at the it's this it was this gallery show called the Shadow Visionaries, and it was all about like early like historical art or from the early 1800s that was like kind of shifting things from the Renaissance, because in the Renaissance
Mm,
you had these depictions of nature that were like utopian, and then
mm,
you had the beginning of like a kind of post-Renaissance Gothic movement in art where it was like actually nature is terrifying, and it was like here's
yeah.
beautiful old like lithograph drawings of like the beasts in nature that are like the unnamed creatures and the unseen horrors, and it's like all these like beautifully cross-hatched inked image, which is like as a comic artist that's like my jam. And
Yeah.
they had like some Francisco Goya lithographs,
Mm.
and everybody knows Goya. But yeah, it was great. I actually took a bunch of pictures. I'll share it with everybody.
That's really cool. I mean, that's why I named my I decided to rename my channel to Renaissance Ministries, is because the Renaissance, I think, really captures that spirit of like thinking differently about something,
Yeah,
of a time of difference, a time of change. And I find, oftentimes within the church, there's a lot of need for solid doctrine, for people to kind of stay on the straight and narrow.
yeah,
That's definitely something that is needed for the general public, because a lot of people, they have a hard time controlling. They need direction. I mean, that's why people go to churches. They're looking for direction. They're looking for to essentially to be told how to think and how to act. And I think that's good. That's, for the most part, that's what the Bible does, is it gives us that direction. It gives us the guidelines to live a healthy, productive, godly life. But I do think that there's a lot of instances in the Bible that are very gray, strange, different.
yeah,
And I find the spiritual realm to be way more complicated than simple. And what I think that I see a lot with people in the church, in small groups, at the universities, is they want it to be neat. They want it to be easy. They want to be able to fit the afterlife into a box that they can wrap up, they can hand on to a lay person in the church. And then that person can, find comfort in, well, this is how I think life is going to be after I die. But I think that after we pass on, we're going to find that the spiritual realm is actually the simplified version of the more complex version that we're going to experience after we after we pass on. And St. Paul kind of describes this reality as but a shadow of a greater reality. What we see in part here, then we shall see in full. But I suspect that the way that heaven and earth and angels and demons and aliens and cryptids, however complicated all of that is, I think that we're going to be very much surprised if we haven't allowed our paradigm to shift, to change, to open, if we haven't rearranged the furniture in our own minds yet. So I think that's kind of the mindset that I want to get in with my channel, is helping people kind of rearrange their furniture in their head, biblically speaking, of some of these stranger passages in the Bible.
Yeah, and that's actually, so I've been reading it for the first time, really, the Old Testament with my wife, and like reading as an adult and being like, man, this book is nuts. This book is like,
Yeah.
it is not just like finger wagging. It is a deeply packed narrative. It's got, there's so many characters, there's so much happening. There's so much like sexual debauchery between characters, and you're like, oh my goodness, no wonder God was so mad all the time. Everybody's like cheating, and everybody's like, there's that one instance I was reading about with, I think, Joseph, and he has the two wives, and they keep they're sisters, and they keep competing to see who's going to have more of his kids. I was like, what on earth? Like, what? Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, with Jacob,
not Joseph. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was reading it, and I started laughing a little bit because I was like, this is like Maury. This is like,
yeah. Well, it's definitely rated R,
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely is a rated R, Old Testament, especially. It's more like the Passion of the Christ than it is like The Chosen. You know?
That's, oh wow, The Chosen. Oh, you're talking about the new show, The Chosen. I thought you were talking about that movie.
Yeah, I like The Chosen, but I prefer the more gritty kind of realistic, sort of intense version of things. And I think that's kind of like what Mel Gibson captured with The Passion of the Christ.
The Chosen, I haven't watched it yet. I like the scenes I've seen. Like it has a kind of appeal that I can understand. I haven't watched it yet, but something that always is like a little bit of a turnoff to me. I don't want to, because that sounds like a strong word for it. The show does seem appealing, but something about it that does seem a little bit like not exactly my cup of tea is the kind of the anachronistic writing sometimes.
Yeah, it's kind of soapy.
Yeah.
It's a little bit corny. And some people have different preferences when they sit down to watch something. Like they don't want to be kind of on edge. They want to be sort of comforted and kind of coddled. They want to relax. They want to watch like something that's more soap opera-y or a little less dramatic. So I can understand that. But when I read the Bible, that is the furthest thing that I see from the reality.
Yeah,
but also,
I agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, just the reality of humans and of life and existence itself. It's a very deep and a very beautiful, but also dark reality that we live in. We have such incredible capabilities for, incredible achievements, beautiful architecture, writing. We can achieve so much. We can do so much, but we can also stoop so incredibly low at the same time,
Yeah.
And that's something you really don't see in the animal world in the same way that you see in humans, is our propensity for greatness and our propensity for darkness.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's an interesting point, because people that are sort of anti-human will often say like, oh, well, you never see animals committing these incredible acts of treachery. It's like, well, I would argue that yes, humans are capable of being as bad as animals. but we're also
Worse in some
in
cases,
some cases worse. Yeah, but we're also capable of levels of generosity that most animals are not even capable of even comprehending. Like
Right.
it's just weird that people will talk about how, I mean, like I get it. Humans can be disgusting and awful. And I'm often
Hmm.
really like horrified by things people do, but also like, can you think of any other species on the planet that would, I mean, they don't even have the capacity to understand this, but that would do what they can to preserve a species that's dying out, that hasn't, that can't benefit. You know what I mean? Like, oh no, this species of bird is dying out because of deforestation. What can we do to save it? Like the fact that we even as a species are like doing that,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
like fairly unique.
we're meant to tend. I think that's was Adam's original job, is to tend and to keep the garden.
Yeah, we're stewards.
That was, yeah, and we are meant to be the guardians of this earth. And in many ways we fall short of that. But there's a proverb that says, a righteous man cares for the life of his animal.
Yeah.
And I think that really captures just kind of like God's heart. Like, I think as I grow in my walk with Christ, I've been
Mm.
telling, some friends this. I told this to my wife. I said, I feel like I have a greater love and appreciation for animals as well. And I think that kind of just goes into how what we're saying is we're not just stardust crashing into other stardust. Is there's levels of love and care and depth that we can have for animals, for one another. We, like I said, we have a propensity for such great love and goodness towards one another and towards God's creation. So I think we really do need to be like the original Adam was, the stewards of earth as God intended us. That was the original state. And yet we've fallen so far from that in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the weird contempt. It's interesting that like the in discussions between environmentalists and people that are not necessarily environmentalists have this like contentious area, because I really don't understand that, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
just because I don't agree with some of the more extreme environmentalists does not mean that they don't have like remarkably good points about our responsibility to this planet. I don't know why. I don't understand the binary about the issue and how people get,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that goes with a lot of things. I don't, it's interesting because I do think that right and wrong, as far as decisions you make moment to moment, is in many cases strongly binary. But I also think that large scale issues of any kind are really not intensely there is a right and wrong binary within that, but essentially there is a series of right or wrong decisions you can take on either side of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's like, because I over the years, it's like my understanding of environmental discussion has deepened a little bit. It used to be
Right.
it used to be very surface, and as I'm understanding it, I'm like, wow, this is incredibly complicated, and it's like there's no hard solutions. There's only like trade-offs. Like, okay, if we do this,
Yeah.
we can fix this, but this other thing might suffer. It's like, okay, but then like we have to make a decision. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the sad thing is, because human beings are fallen creatures, is there's people are liars. They are liars. They don't do what they say they're going to do. And people want you to give their money towards X, Y, or Z. And at the end of the day, a lot of people just don't follow through with what they said they were going to do with
yeah,
that. And so that's the sad reality, is kind of going back to what we said, like human beings, we want this Garden of Eden like way of living, this kind of idealistic, restful peace. That's something that some of the like new light transcendentalists were trying to do in America, like in the early 1700s. Is they wanted to create this kind of utopian and sort of space, but it never really worked out, because they always forget that human beings are sinful. That human beings are envious. We are greedy. There's the sad reality of the matter is we have something that is deeply wrong with us. We have a condition that only Christ can
hmm.
heal, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I get that. I mean, it's it's interesting too, because I do feel like the human desire to be better
Hmm.
is almost enough to make you not hate people,
Right.
depending on how forgiving your mood is at the time. But something you mentioned earlier, I don't want to make such a huge turn, but something you mentioned earlier, you and I were talking about this is a total non sequitur, but
I was thinking, how are we going to tie this in? Because that's philosophy is interesting to me, but I know what we were talking about was a lot more uh,
Yeah,
bizarre
was
stuff.
it Phil Schneider? We were talking about Phil Schneider before we started recording,
We,
and yeah, go
yeah,
ahead, go ahead.
we were at dinner. When we were sitting at dinner, it was one of the friends at the table had brought up a story about how somebody that came into uh, their shop kind of seemed almost like alien like, and she got the ID and he said, what did it say, like what was the name on it, and I made a joke that it said Valiant Thor, and
Oh,
you immediately understood that reference, which is you said it was a deep cut, a
yeah.
deep the Phil Schneider video, who was somebody that was a UFO kind of whistleblower
Hmm.
before it was popular.
I when you said Valiant Thor, I did like the quadruple take. Like I kept turning back to. I was like, "Is this guy for real?" Because I already liked you. I was like, I remember we had left the first time you and I met. We left Dan's place. And these are the dinners I described to people on this channel where Dan cooks these huge meals, and then it's like
Mm-hmm.
he kind of does this thing where I don't think he does this on purpose, but when he invites so many of his friends over, it kind of makes me. I don't know if he's intentionally doing this, but it does make me feel like I'm at one of those like turn of the century society dinners where they have people from every possible culture represented.
Yeah,
It's
no, it's
like,
awesome.
yeah, it's like every people of every political stamp, every ideological viewpoint, religion. Like it's just like it makes me think, like of like Alan Quartermain, like his dinner parties where it's like, you have Sikhs with turbans, you have like, and they're all having like a huge roast of. It's just like it's got this interesting energy where. Yeah, I mean, he's a good guy, so he just attracts different types of people, which is really cool.
No, he really is. And he goes all out. Probably
Yeah,
some of the best food.
yeah.
It's easily the best dinner parties I've been a part of that are just random. They'll just text me, "Hey, you want to come over?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I know Dan's making a feast for all of us."
I know it's really. I mean, when he invites me over, it's like I'm like, okay, what is it, like a 3.5 hour drive? I can do that. Like I'll for more of
Yeah,
Dan's pork belly, I'll do. And
yeah, for
it's
that dinner.
he was up here the other day actually because he was doing an antique haul.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because he has a shelf buying problem that he's medicating, and I don't even remember what the antique was that he was picking up. Oh, it was like a beautiful print from Little Nemo,
Mm,
the old comic strip, like this beautiful old, like the original strip where it's like watercolor and ink,
hmm.
and it's like over 100 years old. And he went to pick it up, and then he just stopped by because he was in the neighborhood. So I took him to this dumpling place, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna come by here more often." And I was like, "Oh, that'd be great. I'd love to see you more." But at the back of my mind, I was like, "Yeah, but like, are you gonna cook when you're here? Like, are you
Yeah,
gonna?"
you could bring.
Are you gonna like come over to my place and cook, and then like and
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
because he's a really good cook. But yeah, sorry, total non sequitur. You mentioned Phil Schneider and Valiant Thor. That was the one that really blew my mind
Mm.
because I have never heard of anyone else know who Valiant Thor was, and I was. I don't know if you had the same experience. You think you're a little younger than me. You're like what, 32, 33?
27.
Oh my God, you're so young. I am a full 12 years older than you, almost 13 years. My goodness.
Hmm.
I was hitting puberty when you were entering the world. That I'm just marveling at this. Okay, so I learned about it in the early days of YouTube, probably like before monetization, when people were just putting up crazy conspiracy videos and like alien stuff. And
Yeah.
I saw the original Valiant Thor videos where it was like, here's
Wow.
footage of this guy who, because you're talking about the Phil Schneider video, right, where he talks about Valiant Thor,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was something very late in my like conspiracy, YouTube haul. Because the early videos of Valiant Thor is old black and white photos from one of Kennedy's speeches, and
Yeah.
and you've seen it, right? And there's a guy there that nobody's been able to identify, and then a bunch of people came forward and were like, "That's someone codenamed Valiant Thor." Who, for anybody who doesn't know, this guy is supposedly like not from Earth, and he was a very human-looking alien, because we have supposedly cousins all over the universe, and that he came to talk to Kennedy, but that multiple people said like his code name is Valiant Thor. He has an IQ of like 700 because his brain is like 2 inches larger in some imperceptible way, but that's enough to I guess broaden his frontal cortex or his occipital bun or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
You know, a lot of this stuff, kind of like back when you were researching it, was definitely considered fringe. Something that people didn't really. They thought it was a little bit taboo to talk about or to think in a way that authenticates extraterrestrials, especially them being in the White House of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, we're talking about it in Congress now. At Congress, I mean, the highest level of government of the entire world in the United States Congress, they're talking about crash retrieval programs, and they're having biologics of non-human origins in their possession. So we are forced at this point to either acknowledge that what they're saying is real, either they're telling the truth or they're lying, and the reality is they're talking about it in Congress. They're having congressional hearings about it. This isn't something that it isn't fringe. It's not fringe in any way anymore.
Yeah, and it's funny how many people will still see that and be like, it's just a distraction from what's really going on. It's like, okay.
It's a psyop. It's a really strange one if that's the case.
Yeah, like that's a very inconvenient psyop. There's like a lot of other things you could do that would be more effective at like, why would you do a psyop that just makes people not trust the government more? Like, where,
exactly.
Oh yes, we've been lying to you for like 100 years. It's just, I don't know. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe this is some expert psychologist working, with the presidency to like distract from cultural tensions. But if so, it's not doing a good job, because it's actually not really at the forefront of discussion at all. It's like people I know who are smart people who keep up with the news are not even aware that there's government documents that have been leaked, not even leaked, but just like put out by the New York Times, where they're openly talking about aliens and being like, yeah, they're real. It's like, holy crap. Like, what?
Well, and I think coming at this from a Christian standpoint, it's like, well, yeah, of course there's other beings. I mean, they're listed all over the Bible. There's different sort of beings. And so that's what I said, like earlier, the realm that is all around us we are just a fraction of a greater reality. We are just mere characters in a giant hodgepodge of multiplicity, probably, of characters enveloping angels, demons, giants, aliens. It really, the rabbit hole for a lot of these stuff goes much deeper than what a lot of Christians would comfortably want to think, talk about, or even speculate on. Mostly because a lot of people, they really want to appear sensible, but how is it at this point that we have the most professional of all professional people in our government talking about it, and yet you still want to remain sensible? How is this not kind of blowing the lid off of your paradigm?
Yeah. It's it's easier to trick people than it is to convince them they've been tricked.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's like, once you are showing people that they were tricked before, their ego enters into it, and then they're like, oh, I was believing. Like I remember somebody in my family and I got into a heated debate about it, because they were literally putting out information being like, aliens are real. Sorry, we haven't, like, here's secret government documents from the 1960s or 50s where, people are discussing openly in these documents like extraterrestrial life and the certainty of it and where they might be from, what their motivations are. And he was so doggedly being like, nah, this is just a distraction from what, and it was just like that. I mean, like, even if you believe that, do you believe that the documents are a forgery? And I remember just going over the logic with him, and he couldn't he couldn't be like reasoned with because his ego was entering into the discussion. And it was like, because I was like, okay, the government wants to earn your trust to believe them on something else by feeding you information that only reinforces that they've lied to you in the past with with an almost indiscriminate hand. Like it didn't quite work for me logically, and I was trying to explain it to him, and he just, it was funny because I don't usually get into these arguments with people, but he was so condescending because the fact that I was like someone who thought aliens were real and he wasn't.
Yeah.
And I was just like, it's like the only reason you have this condescension is because you're operating under this very dated presupposition that that you're a skeptic and I'm not, when in reality your theory is actually more irrational than mine at this point.
Yeah, anybody that wants to treat you like you're, not well mentally is just insecure because they haven't opened up their paradigm. And the funny thing is, like, all right, well, what's your explanation for this strange floating rock that we're on, floating in space, and with conscious brains that, somehow came to exist from nothingness? There's just, the reality is so beyond weird, just existing, just being a human, just walking about, being able to, just be. It completely contradicts this sort of like normie mentality that people have, because they really haven't thought about anything deeply. They're too busy. People are too busy watching their Netflix and scrolling on their TikToks, sadly.
Yeah, I got to say, there is something about, I try not to look down on people in large groups, but there is something that I've noticed lately where I do get discouraged when I'm around people that I can tell are like not interested in anything.
Yeah, right.
I don't encounter it that much anymore because as I'm getting older, I'm like much more selective with who I spend a lot of time with.
Yeah.
And, and it's mostly my wife. And, and so like, she's pretty interested in things, but,
right.
But like every now and then, like I'll meet a friend of a friend or something, and I'll just meet someone at a party or at a gathering, and it's someone I've never spoken to. And I'll just like, even if I brush up on a topic that's even slightly out of like the mainstream wheelhouse, and they have no idea what I'm talking about any of it. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, come on. Like, really? You've never heard of like,
You're throwing out a line. Yeah. You're throwing out a line, seeing if anything bites. And that's kind of, I think, what we had at dinner at Dan's house. I swallowed it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah. It was funny because it was, I really, guys, I cannot stress to any of you in the chat how weird it was to hear the words Valiant Thor leave another person's mouth. Because I was like, Valiant Thor is among the most fringe UFO stuff because it literally is a picture of a guy who looks human and somebody's saying that this guy was not human. And it's like, it's not like a shady picture of an alien gray or a UFO. It's like, this is a guy in a black and white photo talking to Kennedy that nobody's identified. And all these former government workers are like, that dude was from like Venus or something. I forgot what it was. And that's pretty fringe, in a lot of ways. That's like a really, it's a pretty intense thing to try to convince people. And I was so into this stuff that I remember, and I don't know now if I believe or not, but I do still find it fascinating to the point where like, I work in comics, as you know, and I wrote a whole script for this whole comic series that was going to be about the ufology and the disclosure, and it was going to be, and Valiant Thor was a character in it. It was like, how old would he be now in 2010 or whenever this was? And I aged him up, and then I thought, what would he be doing in the interim years from his trip to Earth? And it was like all this like really fun writing, and then I was like,
oh yeah, I
tried pitching it to Image Comics, and they were like, we can't publish this. This is like hundreds of pages. And they already had a UFO book coming out that year, and that always gets me out of Images when I'm pitching something and they have a similar genre coming out in the same like year span. So I guess, okay.
Well, that's a really good idea. I like that idea a lot. Yeah, it's kind of playing into what his purpose would be today politically. What sort of function he would be serving now.
Yeah, well, there's and then I got pissed because I saw that trailer for the new Spielberg movie. Have you seen it? Because
Disclosure, right?
Yeah, he stole my idea.
What was the idea for the Disclosure movie and how it played into your comic
Well,
unveiling?
it's just the idea that the idea that somebody takes it upon themselves to stop doing drip feed disclosure and that they're going to do it all at once,
Yeah,
and that
right,
humanity's going to have this big awakening because they're going to talk about aliens openly,
right.
and that we might get to see all, not just because it's like one thing that I've been little fatigued of culturally is all of these movies where it's like you're talking about aliens the whole movie, and then at the end there's a ship. Oh, I saw it for a second. Oh,
Right.
maybe they're out there. Wink, like Contact. And I was like, when you get deep into alien lore and ufology, your mentality at that point is like, okay, there's like hundreds of species. Like, let's just go full crazy, like with like a bunch of different species of aliens all interacting at once.
Right.
Let's give people a smorgasbord of like aesthetics and theory and cool stuff like Star Trek.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I kind of wanted to do, and it feels like that's why the trailers for the new Spielberg movie are so they're so like spoiler proof, is because I suspect that what he's hiding is that a huge portion of the movie is like showing all of these different species depicted as they have been in like the government documents. And you know
Yeah. I think Spielberg definitely, at this point, it's not even a secret that he is kind of a soft
yeah.
disclosure for CIA stuff. I mean, it's not. I mean, the CIA has a budget for Hollywood productions and propaganda. That's just true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that they know of this reality, and they don't. They need to kind of slowly. I mean, that's what's called revelation of the method. Is when you kind of slowly feed a society these ideas so that when it come time when human beings are ready for whatever great information they've been keeping from us, it won't be so uh, it'll be easier to swallow essentially.
Yeah, I mean it's it's a very effective method because they've been doing that for decades, and now most people are like, yeah, aliens, okay, fine.
Hmm.
Honestly,
Hmm.
aliens being real is like the least stressful thing for a lot of people right now.
Yeah,
It's like
I
not,
think
it doesn't even bother me that much.
right. And we were talking about this at Dan's house, where we were talking about categorically. So coming at it from a Christian perspective, a lot of Christians they just say, "Oh, all that stuff is it's just demonic. It's just demons." But they
Mm,
kind of get their ideas categorically mixed up when it comes to angels, different types, classes of angels, demons, what demons are, and then what aliens are. Essentially, having for all these people having never even read any ufology books or made themselves familiar with David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, all these people that kind of did the groundwork for the ufology. But people, they kind of dismiss it offhand as just, oh, it's just demonic disillusionment. And it's like, I think that these beings, these, let's say grays categorically, I do think that they are uh I don't think I think they're maleficent. I don't think that they're here for good intentions. I do think that there's sort of this obfuscation of humanity going on through them.
yeah.
So I think and that's what kind of like we spoke about briefly at the dinner table that night was there sometimes these abductees would get these messages that Jesus Christ was this ascended being who needed to be pushed along the evolutionary line, and that's what the resurrection was. Therefore, we need to become ascended like Christ did, but through these extraterrestrials. And so this is a deception that Christians really need to be keyed in on, because it plays into getting kind of Christians off the straight and narrow, this and kind of putting Christ as a side character and not the main savior, not God incarnate in human flesh, but rather just another one of the extraterrestrials, essentially. So I do think that there's sort of a demonic element, but I don't think that these grays and these aliens are categorically demons.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you so like, we can get deep into the weirdness of this. So when you hear about demons and things like that, you think that that's separate from people's encounters with like malevolent grays and reptilians and things of that sort?
I think that, yeah, the fact that these entities abduct people without their consent, and especially in the case of children, I think is a horrible act to do. And much of the experiments that these people are subjected to are highly invasive, and sexual in nature, and it's not the sort of thing that anybody that would have our betterment in mind would, kind of carry out. A lot of what they're doing is essentially extracting human DNA so that they can clone other humans is what the research seems to suggest. And I'm not saying that I believe this entirely. I'm just saying what I've familiarized myself with from the literature.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was last really clued in on the UFO discussion, it was like there was kind of this ongoing heated debate between Dr. Stephen Greer, who's head of the Disclosure Project,
Yep.
and then the people from Project Avalon, right? And like, so these are two different schools of thought. Stephen Greer is someone who he's a bit woo woo, he's a bit
Yep.
hippy dippy, but his viewpoint is like that there's no negative ETs, there's no aliens that are evil, because he believes that in order for a species to become as advanced as they have, to live at that long and to reach that level of societal and technological advancement, that they must be benevolent, because we could only live that far as a species through like coming over, overcoming our our primitive nature, which I think is a very flawed perspective. Because it's interesting because he takes a very atheistic approach where he's like not atheistic, but like our understanding of God and the universe is like primitive and we have to outgrow all these primitive religions. And that seems to be his viewpoint. But then all he's doing is replacing that dogma, that dynamic with the aliens, because he's turning them into what is essentially a God figure.
Yeah.
He's turning them into this pure, infallible good, which
Right.
so that's not very thoughtful. Like it's yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
It's an obfuscation of Christ as the center. So Christ is all that is good in its totality. And I think too, what you're seeing is this temptation. It's the same temptation as old as time. Adam and Eve in the garden, they were tempted through the enticement of being as gods. Ye shall be as gods, is what Genesis 3 says. And that's what the serpent tempted Adam and Eve with in the garden. Is God doesn't want you to eat from this because he knows that when you eat of it, your mind will be enlightened and ye shall be as gods. And so whenever you see these demonic kind of satanic ideologies play itself out in these other beings, if the grays, whatever they are, telepathically speaking to people, saying, you need to become ascended. Ye shall be as gods. This Christian Judeo understanding of a singular entity creating the world, that's outdated. You are God. You are this enlightened one. It's the same thing. It's the same temptation as old as time. So I think that's why it's so interesting. Is it's not like the Bible isn't just a book that is this hodgepodge of stories. There's a consistent narrative that goes 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 years back to when the garden was to today. That same ideology is playing itself out now. And I think that's what you're seeing with these creatures, especially with the messages that Greer is receiving. But also, why would he not look at the kind of horrific examples these abductees have had?
Well, so here's what Stephen, because he got into a heated debate with the guys from Project Avalon, because they were like, of course there's negative ETs. Like there's, so they're telling him about these horror stories that have been around since the 50s of people that get abducted and they get, sexually violated. They get tortured.
Exactly.
All this their bodies they're treated like experimental fodder. And Stephen Greer's response, and this has been his ongoing theory, is that there are no negative ETs. Those experiences are likely fake ETs created by our government in order to set us up for a false flag attack. So it's the idea,
Yeah.
this idea that the military-industrial complex wants to keep itself functioning, and that it'll do that by or that it wants to maintain control. It'll do that by setting up a false ET enemy so that we can raise billions of dollars to fight it and keep it. And that, to me, I mean, maybe there's some evidence to support that, but it does feel like a stretch to me, and so that he doesn't have to
Definitely.
concede that some alien species are just not good. Like, why would that? It's so naive to be like. I mean, I see it in the chat too. Broken Blade says that he thinks it's an incredibly naive way of looking. Yeah, it is. It's also very
Yeah.
anti-human. It's like, oh,
Mm.
anything evil comes from us. Anything good comes from something that isn't human, because humans are so broken, and we all, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm just so tired of that perspective of like, it often comes from this place of I don't know, it's stupidity masquerading as intelligence
Yeah.
to attribute everything good to the other and everything bad to oneself.
Yeah, and a lot of these same messages that people are receiving from these entities are the same messages that people experience often when, high on certain psychedelics or ayahuasca, kind of interacting with these interdimensional beings. They have similarities in their message, and I think that's something that you can kind of see. These aren't isolated ideas. There is a binding element. All of them are kind of answering to some entity essentially, and I think that that's what you're seeing with a lot of these cases of people when they go into psychedelic states, with Stephen Greer kind of going into these trance-like mentalities, and they are actually speaking. They're actually contacting something, and it's not. It has the intent to deceive, I think.
Yeah, he's had some incredible. I mean, like I've seen articles with people that did his like weekend tour thing in the desert.
Yeah.
And they were like, I didn't encounter anything out there. I don't know. It seems like a bunch of hooey. And then you've had other people be like, yeah, I was with him for one of his tours in the desert, and I literally saw like a person made of light for like 5 seconds. And there was one caught on video. There was one caught on video where they were doing some kind of like, trying to summon some entity or whatever in Eben, and
Lame.
yeah, in the middle of the desert, and it literally, like, you can see it on camera. It's like something combust, like light in the center of their seance, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the orbs and
Well, it
things
was
of,
literally a bipedal form, and they did a freeze frame of it, of
yeah,
when the explosion happens, and you can see a figure in the light. And he was breaking it down afterwards, being like, "We're being visited by some like benevolent." I was like, "You don't know what that is.
yeah,
You don't know if that's positive." Like, it makes me think of like I know this is a simplistic way of looking at the world, but like, I don't mess around with Ouija boards. I don't know what I'm talking to.
yeah. Right, exactly.
And it's
No,
like,
I agree.
yeah, go on, please.
No, I agree. I think that these narratives, they're just too similar for it to be coincidence. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Well,
go ahead,
and
please.
this whole paradigm, this whole perspective too, it goes. The reason I think that a lot of this stuff is possible is not just because I think it's happening today, but I also think it's the playbook that Satan was using in the beginning of time, in the what you call, a Christian would call, the antediluvian era. Well, not just Christians, but a lot of religions, have
Yeah,
these the stories that have survived thousands of years, separated from multiple continents, about this kind of golden age, essentially, before a great calamity, a great flood. Um, and that goes all the way back to the book of Genesis, with Genesis chapter 6, with the sons of God, and they saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, that they were comely, and they took wives unto them, and they bore children through
hmm,
these angels and these women's intermixed, and they had these offsprings that were called the Nephilim,
yeah,
and they were what was called giants on the earth, and they caused all this chaos, this problem, and essentially that's why the flood, Noah's flood, took place, was to rid this earth of this genetic defilement of humankind. And I think that that's exactly the sort of thing that you're seeing with this abduction phenomenon, is this
oh, that's
attempt
interesting.
this attempt to. So this is not a new playbook for Satan in any way. It's the
Wow.
same sort of deception from the beginning. So, I mean, let me try to. I'll take it back even further. So, in Genesis 3:15, part of the curse upon Adam and Eve for their sin, he cursed. Adam would have to toil the ground and work and be laborsome, and they no longer had access to the tree of life. So one day they would die, and Eve likewise would desire to be over her husband, but her husband shall be over her, is what the scripture says. And it says that he'll greatly increase her pain in childbirth. That's part of the curse as well. And then it says, God turns and he says to the serpent, on your belly you shall crawl all your days, and I will put enmity between your seed, meaning the seed of the serpent, and I will put enmity between the women's seed. That's Genesis 3:15. It's called the proto-evangelium. And what you see immediately is you kind of get into the mind of Satan. Satan's thinking, and it says that the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. That's Genesis 3:15. And so Satan immediately understands, the seed of the woman is going to kill me, essentially. He's going to crush my head. And that verse is actually indicative of the virgin birth of Christ, because women don't have seed. Women have eggs. And so a man, how is it that a woman can have a seed? That's the virgin birth. That's Christ coming to the world. The seed of the woman, Jesus was the seed of the woman, crushing the head of the serpent. And that's what you see at Calvary. And that's what you see in the writings of Paul in the New Testament, is he's talking about how Satan's authority has been quenched after the cross. The cross essentially has crushed the head of the serpent. But if you go back to Genesis, that's Genesis 3, you go 3 chapters ahead, there's been, Adam and Eve, Cain, Abel, you have all those stories. It goes all the way up to Noah, going down the generations. And it says that the sons of God, the angels essentially, saw the daughters of men, or the daughters of men, and they wanted to sleep with them. They wanted to have sex with them so that they could procreate, so that they could have children, essentially, because it was something that angels weren't allowed to have. And so what you see immediately, getting back into the mind of Satan, is his desire to infect the seed of humanity, because he knows that it's through the human seed that the Messiah is going to come. And so he's thinking, if I can infect humankind, that's going to prolong my time. That's going to keep the Messiah from coming. So I think that's what you're seeing in Genesis 6, why this Nephilim fallen angel narrative is playing out in Genesis. And then I think that's what you're seeing today as well. There's some sort of incentive that the enemy has to obfuscate our humanity.
Yeah. Sorry, go on. Please go ahead, finish.
I don't know if that makes complete sense or not. What are your thoughts?
I actually, so this notion was introduced to me pretty recently, and somebody just mentioned it in passing, and I had never heard that before up until like 2 months ago. And now I think it's super awesome. This idea, just to break it down for my audience, someone presented it as like the idea that the giants and from the Bible that get referenced in all these ancient alien stories of the ancient giants, and how the Bible and the pre-Christian history, even seen from a ufology perspective, that they actually coincide pretty well. The idea being that the whole reason that these creatures were having these babies with women was to pollute the bloodline of man in order to prevent the Messiah from being born. I thought that was maybe the coolest fucking thing I'd ever heard, because it was like this idea that it just, for me as a writer, it gave this really cool context to the story of the human race as being essentially a cold war between good and evil.
Yeah.
And this idea that like, that what we think of as the devil is this entity, this malevolent force behind things that's trying to prevent the salvation of the human race, and that there's this far larger positive entity that works slower and perhaps more strategically to slowly save
Yeah.
us from ourselves over the course of like several thousand
Hmm.
years, and that story is already written because this being perceives the world outside of time, and
Yeah.
that even though the malevolent force, what we call Satan, it's like it can't operate as effectively, like he's not nearly as powerful, but he's very skilled at like subverting humanity by using humanity, you know. So I just love this idea. I was like, that is fascinating, that like this notion that there's this like, yeah, this ancient Cold War happening where these malevolent forces are trying to pollute the bloodline as much as possible to prevent this like messianic hero from being born and from
Absolutely.
coming into the bloodline. And so as a result,
Hmm.
what they created are these like freaks, these
Yeah.
giants and you know, chimeras and all these creatures that are like, because then you have, and I'm going to get further with this, is that you have these ancient myths of and how many nightmare creatures in ancient myth are just unnatural combinations of animals that
Hmm.
like that are not, you know, like the head of a lion, the body of a snake, and you're like, why do they keep doing that?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and so there's this theory that some of these creatures may have existed in some way, and that it was an act of evil by something dark and trying to mock the beauty of creation, because
Hmm.
this thing wants to do all the time is just subvert what is good, and like creation is good, and like animals and humans are made in, you know, to some extent. I mean, we're all made in God's image in some way, but this idea that animals are like an act, like the creation of every species by God in biblical lore, the creation of every species is an act of love.
Hmm.
So to mock that creation is to like put the head of one on the body of another to make something hideous and terrible. So
Yeah.
like it put all this interesting stuff in context of like, maybe that's what we're seeing. Maybe some of this stuff was real and it was actually like I find that so fascinating. And there's some, and I was like, man, I really hope somebody does a graphic novel of this, and like somebody is. I'm gonna send you to his channel when you get a chance. Check him out. Matt Rhodes.
Yeah. Matt Rhodes.
Have you heard of him?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
Let me look
he's a very popular illustrator who's worked in like animation and comics and stuff. And he's working on a series called Dead Gods, which has a
Uh-huh.
whole YouTube channel where he's developing the project live, and like people vote on different stuff, and it's basically all about the antediluvian period leading up to the flood.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it's like this character who's basically Noah on this adventure to collect as much data and information as he can before the flood happens, because he's basically on a message. He's like on a mission from God to like, you know, collect as much information and wisdom as he can because he knows the end is coming. But it's like a journey through the antediluvian world and seeing how far society has turned into decay because everybody's worshiping these false gods, and like, and it's full of like giants and freaks, and it's like really cool illustrations of like showing a lot of it. The design is really crazy because it's like this super ancient civilization, and a lot of it looks a lot like that movie Apocalypto. Like it's got this crazy nightmarish ancient futurism vibe.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah,
It's
I'm checking out a little bit of his stuff right now. It's very cool.
yeah. It's like everybody's sort of getting more interested in this stuff. Like there's been
Yeah.
a real resurgence of it, and you can feel like he has a genuine interest in it, but also that he's like, oh, this is a good time to do this. Like there's an
Yeah.
audience for this right now, you know?
Well, the thing that's interesting about the antediluvian world is the further back you go, the more impressive the architecture is. And
Yeah,
the future generations after the flood, there was definitely some sort of technological reset. And what you're seeing is people finding the base stones, the largest stones that, any civilization had ever built with, and they can't even get close to building with the same sort of megalithic blocks or structures. So they
yeah,
build on top of it, but of a much more just not impressive scale. They
yeah,
come and that's what you see. You see that in you see a lot of that stuff in Peru. You see that in Egypt. You see it in all over every continent. Essentially has this technology that's older. The older it is, the more impressive it is. And then all of a sudden there seems to have been some sort of great, reset essentially.
yeah. No, I and it's there's really interesting, crazy context of like the idea that we are as far away from ancient Egypt. We're as far away from ancient Egypt is. Sorry, the distance between the distance chronologically between us and ancient Egypt is the same distance between ancient Egypt and ancient Egypt, meaning like there were
Yep.
people alive during the times of Cleopatra
Yep.
who were studying ancient Egypt because their civilization was already so old that it was as far away from them as they are from us right now. And it's like that
Right.
is so that's like my brain can't quite fit that thought
Yeah.
in. It's like I can't quite process that. I don't have the data
Yeah.
retention, but like the idea that they themselves were trying to uncover the ancient myths of their own civilization because they've been around for so long, and that there was all these weird dips and resets and stuff. It's like
Hmm.
that is crazy, you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the ways that we know that it just wasn't this, kind of like with the pyramids, wasn't just this building of the dynastic Egyptians, is there's absolutely no hieroglyphs of them being built. There's not one depiction, not one papyrus discovered. Uh, you would expect that such a monumental discovery would have been documented in some form, shape, or way. But and just the fact that I do think what you're looking at is angelic technology. The
Hmm.
fingerprints of the gods, as Graham Hancock says.
Yeah, yeah, and Zachariah Sitchin had some interesting takes on it.
Hmm.
Although he's like I think he believed that we were created by aliens, which I don't know if I don't know if I buy that, you know.
Hmm.
But I do think that there must have been some kind of ancient interference of but I don't know that I would credit them with our creation because it just I mean not just because it conflicts with my beliefs as a Catholic, but also because it's just like it just seems so. Oh, this is interesting. So for anyone who's new to UFO stuff, there was a whole part of this discussion about when the Roswell crash happened, and the day after Roswell, I think talks about some of this. When the government was making its first contacts, supposedly its first contacts with these alien species, they ran into a problem, which is that nearly every single species they encountered told them that they were our creators. And so it became this like thing where the government had a policy apparently of like don't trust any of these fucking people because every single one of them claims to be the fathers of our creation, the fathers of our
Yeah.
civilization,
Right.
and it started to become really clear like oh they're manipulating us, like we're being
Hmm.
manipulated. So then the government sort of took this like this antagonistic view of every new species that comes in because they all keep trying to feed us the same BS story, which is really interesting as a concept that like that because that to me is really chilling because that feels like it could be very real like as a real story
Yeah.
of what happened that like you can imagine that would be real like if you encounter these species that are so much older than us, they're not going to try to they don't really care about taking us by force, but
Yeah.
what they want is to get us to just like relax and accept them as our daddies, and so
Yeah.
they keep feeding us the same fiction that they're oh no we're your god, we're God. Don't worry,
Hmm.
we are the God you were praying to. You just and you're like, what are you trying to do? What is it? Just it makes you uneasy, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you said, these are ancient, highly intelligent. I mean, if you could even put a number on what type of IQ
Yeah.
these entities possess, I think you'd be mind blown if you could get an accurate number. But something I was thinking about, going back to the kind of tying the ufology with the kind of angelic with the Bible idea, is human beings. So we're mid intelligence. I mean, we're definitely smart, but we're mid compared to these beings. And we do all sort of material manipulation all the time, and we do quite impressive things. We sculpt, we manipulate biologics towards medical ends and goals. And then you kind of think, well, what could an entity that's 1,000 times smarter than you do with the material world? Would they not mess around with biologics? Would they not construct some sort of craft, some sort of weapons, let's say? And this is going back into like what I was saying about the spiritual realm is more complex than the physical realm. We know in our realm we build, we do things, we have government, we have culture. And then when you look at the book of Revelation, the book of Ezekiel, the book of Jeremiah, anytime a prophet is given a vision into heaven, they describe things like there's streets of gold, there's mansions, there's books that were open. They keep records. An angel was carrying a sword of some type. In Genesis chapter 3, when they're expelled from the garden, there's a flaming sword that's guarding the way back into the tree of life. What are these things? And the funny thing is, Christians, we don't even ask, okay, if there's books, did somebody bind that book? Did somebody cut the tree down to make that book in the spiritual realm? There's swords. Did somebody have to fashion these swords? There's so many layers of thought that can be put into this when it comes to angels actually having jobs, cultures, understandings, ways of doing things. And so that made me think, like, so whatever we're seeing in the sky, whatever sort of manifestations are in these UFO worlds, it could just be we're finally starting to understand how this stuff operates and works. We've finally advanced to a point technologically where we could understand maybe something of the angelic realm, whereas somebody 2,000 years ago might not have been able to have understood it.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, so we're going to go a layer deeper now. So this connects, interestingly, with something I'd heard from the Disclosure Project. They're interviewing a scientist, right, who allegedly worked on UFOs. And essentially they had, for anyone who doesn't know, the Disclosure Project on YouTube, go watch it. It's fascinating interviews, 400 hours of interviews with former government workers talking about all this stuff. Oh, hey, what's up, Squiggle Tech? Welcome. Sorry, I should have spotted you earlier. How you doing, man? Also, Johnny says his family is Freemason. Hashtag eyes on Johnny Pearson. So this scientist who had worked on UFOs said that this is crazy. He said, like, it's hard for us to get our heads around this, but the reason, he said that when you look at some of the construction of what we call UFOs, but they're identified at this point, that when he was walking around the interior of like a flying saucer, he said something he noticed right away was that there was no hints of construction, that it's like literally one solid piece as if it was molded. Injection molded, essentially. And that he's like, how is that possible with something of this size, like from a manufacturing standpoint? And what he basically learned over time, and this is him trying to break it down for like normal people, but what they essentially learned was that, what they essentially theorize is that this is thousands of years ahead of where we are technologically, thousands of years probably. But the idea being that they construct these UFOs in a like fifth dimensional space, and then they drop it down into 3 dimensions afterwards, almost like some sort of strange esoteric technology constructed in another realm of thought and then brought into the physical realm. So like it's almost like science and religious philosophy are kind of like rubbing up against each other. This idea that like, because you hear people talk about their concept or their encounters of heaven and hell and all that stuff, and the idea that like what we understand of time and space is very different when you enter like the spiritual realm. So then when you hear that, it sounds a lot like scientific discussion of 12th dimensional space, things like that.
Yeah.
And so the idea of technology that is constructed in a realm that is, Johnny says it's a metaphysical 3D printer. Exactly. Yeah, that's eyes on Johnny. So the idea that it's constructed, like the idea that aliens understand that there is a realm of pure thought and that you can construct things in that realm and then bring it down into a 3-dimensional space, which sounds like pure fantasy. But if you got to remember, guys, that like if you were to show a cell phone to somebody from just 200 years ago, they would have freaked out. Their minds couldn't handle it watching a YouTube video on an iPhone. Like they would have literally gone insane looking at it, or they would have thought you were evil or possessed by the devil.
Sorcery,
Yeah. And that's just 200 years. So imagine now thousands of years. And then imagine with those thousands of years, the rate at which technology improves also increases over time. Like not only does technology improve, but the rate at which it improves also speeds up. So it's
Right.
just like when you consider that, the idea that we would have technology that where it's like, yeah, oh, we constructed this in the realm of thought and then dropped it into three-dimensional space. It's like, that's not so hard for me to believe, honestly. But
Well,
yeah, go on.
we already essentially do this on a microcosm level with quantum computing. Um, and somebody that might understand it better than I do can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but from what I'm gleaning from the internet, it suggests that its power comes from exploring many parallel universes simultaneously, which each quabit quabit. I don't know how to pronounce that. Quabit
I mean, if you're wrong,
superposition.
I'm not going to know.
Yeah.
I majored in fine
Well,
art.
yeah.
Continue.
Well, the fact that I didn't understand how quantum computing works, my brother mentioned this to me, that it's basically you're trying to solve problems on a quantum computer level at the same time by shifting the problem into other dimensions, essentially, and then checking all of the solutions all at once, so you could get the answer instantaneously. But that's what it says. It's the superpositioning through branching into different realities. While this
Well,
theory explains how quantum computers can tackle complex problems so fast by working across these worlds, essentially.
that's something I had not heard before. That's
But
pretty
well,
engaging.
the funny thing is, like, that is what we're doing on a small scale through quantum computing, and I am not nearly intelligent enough to really understand what's going on with that. But when I heard that that's how quantum computers operate, I was like, why is this not commonly known? How strange we've advanced to, this point
Yeah.
that we've advanced to
I mean,
scientifically.
you said,
And
sorry, go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead,
it's
please.
not so far-fetched to think that another entity essentially could be airdropping these sort of craft into our realm. It's really not that crazy to think of it on a larger scale
Yeah.
from entities essentially way smarter than us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just case in point, when you said the term quantum computing, my butthole clenched up like really, really tight. Like instant butthole tension of just like,
Yeah,
uh-oh, I don't know what any of this is.
I don't either. I just know that somebody said it's computers that solves problems instantaneously, but you're essentially doing it on multiple uh, levels.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean,
Parallel.
the idea, it's almost like I forgot what it's called, but there was like some evidence of matter, of certain matter that blips in and out of our reality.
Mm,
And it's like,
yeah.
where is it going when it leaves? Like,
Right.
what is that even? And it's like,
Well,
that's a thing we got to consider. Like,
Well, this is why a lot of theoretical physicists actually end up being religious, and in many cases Christians,
yeah,
because they see there's things like superpositioning of subatomic particles, where you can have a particle existing at two places at once, and you can kind of through their laboratories they can observe the same particle cross culture across the country from the east to the west, and they can see how if you move it this direction or that direction or spin it one way or the opposite way, it'll do the same thing all the way across the country. So, and that's called superpositioning, how something can exist at two places at once. And that kind of puts into our mindset what, these sort of entities, angels, demons, what they're capable of, essentially.
yeah, no, and it's funny you say that because I had just saw this really interesting interview with a guy who was a specialist in the organic science of the eye, of how your
Mm.
eye works. And here, I'm going to lower my brightness a little bit because I feel like I'm blowing people's eyes out with this with my screen for a second. And he's talking about what he learned and how he basically became religious because in studying the eye, he basically realized that it was almost impossible for him to imagine that there wasn't a higher power, because he describes this. He says the eye is already so complicated that the idea the idea that it happened evolutionarily, like without any well, evolution, I certainly believe that evolution is a thing, obviously, but the idea that it happened without input from something external, he said the likelihood is so incomprehensibly small at this point, because this is the way he breaks it down. He says the eye itself, just one part of your body, right? The eye is already so complex in how it works that
Yeah.
the idea that it would work so effectively and that it would just happen on its own is 100,000 times more unlikely than the idea that if you were to drop a bunch of scrap metal off of the back of a truck, that that metal would fall on the ground and form a perfect Jaguar.
Yeah.
He's like
Hmm.
that's essentially what you're talking about. You're talking about a bunch of matter that happens to be, the right elemental composite
Yeah.
just falling randomly and forming something absolutely effectively perfect. And he uses the Jaguars like or something like that, like some beautiful car. And he's like, that is essentially what your eye is. Your eye is a perfect mechanism that does what it does extremely well. And the idea that that just happened as an accident of nature, he's like, he couldn't get his head around it. And then that sort
Hmm.
of led him down the road of realizing that, like, in studying science, it brought him to the idea that, like, okay, there's definitely a higher power. There's definitely something that created us. And then, like, that led him down the road toward, like, the Bible and stuff. And then he started seeing the overlap of biblical history and science. And he was like, okay, this is probably true.
Yeah.
But I really
I,
love
I
that idea. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Well, there are, I know of Christian apologists who are people that defend the Christian faith through intellectual rigor. I know of some Christian apologists who are evolutionary theologians, so they believe in evolution. I don't take that position, but I respect it. The reason is because even if evolution, Darwinian evolution is real, it's still incredible proof for God. It's still so well carried about and planned and coordinated that there has to be an intelligent mind behind the entire operation.
Yeah, I mean, I actually I don't have a problem with that, and that's actually one of the reasons
Yeah.
I'm pretty comfortable even now with being like, yeah, evolution is certainly a thing. But I also I think there's instances in which, if you look further into evolution and how it works, it actually like doesn't bode well for the Darwinian view, like past a certain
Mhm.
point, because then you start to see evidence of external like interference of somebody like redirecting the course of it into certain points in the genome.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
Lloyd Pye talks about that, where he's like if you look at the human genome, you can tell it's like stitched together of different stuff, almost as if somebody came in and just made something, like stringing together parts of different animals to make something new. And he's like,
Yeah.
and he shows the genome and how like ours is like, you can see the stitchwork of where it's like slapped together as if someone was doing like a bunch of sketches and like, trying a different. And it's like he takes the view of like master geneticist, but someone could easily take the view of like a god entity.
Mhm.
I prefer, the notion of God, because it's much, I mean, like for a lot of reasons, I mean, not the least of which is that the idea that I was created by like some alien species that just wanted me to mine for gold is like the most depressing shit I've ever heard. But
Yeah. Mine for gold to thicken the atmosphere to keep
yeah,
the sun
that,
from killing you.
that's literally the story of the human race, is just that. It's like,
Yeah.
well, that's a major bummer. But
Yeah. Well, all it does is just kicks the ball back several thousand million years.
that's true. Yeah.
You just have to ask, well, all right, well, then who created them? There has to be what's called the first uncaused cause. And this is the theological argument and apologetics. So anything that exists has to have had, a beginning. And I think this is why when the Big Bang Theory was, backed up scientifically and proposed, it was problematic for a lot of people that wanted to believe that the universe always just was, like it never had beginning or end. It just has always existed, because anything that begins to exist had to have had essentially something that pushed it out the door,
Yeah.
something that caused it to exist. And so God is what's called the uncaused cause. And I think that's where, like with some of these people like Neil deGrasse Tyson that say, that don't believe in intelligent design, or a God in it. They want you to give them their one miracle, and that is that nothing created everything. Just let me have this one miracle, and then you can do what you want or think as you will. Just give me this one thing. But it's like, well, it just denotes the idea of a creator. You know,
Yeah, well, it's also
There's no-
just it's not really true that you would just be granting one miracle. Like you would be granting much more than that because
exactly.
if
Yeah.
if you know every species that exists on this planet is so enormously complex and beautiful that you're like, okay, it's like if I grant you the big also okay, let's grant the Big Bang as as an atheist would see it potentially, not to strawman anyone's position, but the notion that the entire universe was the size of a pin and then it exploded outward and created everything with no external adjutant of any kind, that it just occurred, that to me seems so much more wild and unbelievable than just the idea that like the God that people have believed in for like hundreds of thousands of years is probably real. Like I don't know, maybe I'm just not that smart, but I'm sure someone will say I'm not, but like the idea that the universe and existence was an unprovoked act of combustion to me
hmm
seems more wild in theory than just the idea that there is a benevolent force behind creation and that we are acts of creation, of like somebody of this incredibly vast consciousness that enjoys creating. Like I don't know
hmm
why that's I don't know why that's some people are allergic to that, but then they'll really push for the Big Bang as being like a something that happened without any external adjutant. And I find
Yeah.
that kind of funny.
Well, the Big Bang, it authenticates the first verse in the Bible. In the beginning, there was a beginning. God created the heavens and the earth. And so, when science of the late 1800s was kind of saying that the universe always was, and it just it didn't have a beginning, it was kind of this attempt to undermine the biblical authority and to try to get people to think in this sort of um, mindset that separated themselves from religion, that kind of would justify them in acting any way that they seem fit, kind of justifying their sin and their wrong living. But when science kind of caught up around I think it was the 1930s or so, when the Big Bang was kind of authenticated as being the most likely scenario or theory, it was kind of problematic for some people because it said, look, the universe had a beginning, and that's what the Bible says, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning.
Yeah.
God created the heavens and the earth. But that wasn't, I mean, that's accepted as fact right now, but there was real tension and desire to undermine that reality. And I think that's what we find a lot is just scientifically, especially with the discovery of DNA. I mean, that's genetic, that's like computer code, and
Hmm.
you wouldn't look at computer coding and think that that was a result of random, that's just stardust, that's just star matter that created that genetic code within us. I mean, it's just level of um the level of coping that one has to
There is a
do.
bit of cope, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's sad, but and I say it because I think the saddest thing is God really wants to have a relationship with us, and I think that's the whole narrative and story of the Bible is finding a way to get us back into the family, back into the fold, as I was saying when we first started out.
Yeah. Well, it for me, so for anyone who doesn't know, who's never listened to me before, if you're discovering my channel for the first time, I went through many years of being like, I wouldn't say an atheist because I definitely believed in a soul and everything, but I was also like, I wasn't a gross materialist, but I had a very anti-religious viewpoint, through after college and, all the usual shit people, go through. And my interest in conspiratorial secrecy and stuff, that's kind of what led me back to this, was because I don't know if I get the sense you've been religious your whole life, David, and like for
Yeah.
me for me, what happened was I went on this whole journey through all this stuff for like 20 years of reading about all, ancient secrets and civilizations and conspiracy theories and what's being hidden and secret knowledge and the baseline of esoterics. And what that essentially brought me back to full circle was like, oh, the biggest conspiracy theory is like this denial that there's a God. And
Yeah.
that, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, that's kind of what's going on. Is like, it's like when you look at a lot of this stuff, a lot of it is that there's this perhaps even an unconscious effort to bring us toward moral relativism,
Yeah.
which is like this desire to destroy notions of good and evil, which I think some people
Yeah.
think of as enlightenment, but I think what we're seeing now is the end of the enlightenment period, which is why there's so much chaos,
Yeah.
is because
Well,
you have people that truly believe that there's no such thing as good and evil, and they're acting that out.
yeah. Well, what is it that Broken Blade had said? He had mentioned Aleister Crowley
Oh man,
earlier,
yeah,
summoning entities in the desert, and that's sort of his whole idea was "do what thou wilt."
yeah. Do what
Do
thou
what you
wilt.
want. Whereas God says, do what I. That is the in a lot of these occultic understandings, Satan is seen more as the liberator away from God rather than the one to whom is binding us to our flesh and to our sin. We're in bondage. No matter what, you're going to be serving someone. Either you're going to be serving your flesh, you're going to be serving the devil, or you're going to be serving God. We are creatures designed to worship. So when Crowley says, "Do what thou wilt," he's giving this notion that Lucifer is the light bringer, as Isaiah 14 says. He's is what Lucifer means. In Hebrew, it's Hallel ben Shakar, which means the light bearer. And so some of these other interpretations, who was mentioned Freemasonry. Freemasons attribute Lucifer as being the light bearer, the one that is bringing illumination to the world, that's freeing mankind from the bondage of doing what God wants, and is instead giving us this idea of do what you want, do as thou wilt, which is Crowleyan understanding. And he had a lot of connections with Freemasonry, with Kabbalah, and different sort of occultic understandings of twistings of some of these scriptures. But I think that's definitely what you're seeing today, just like through the New Age and stuff, is you are your own God. You're this own ascended master, this own little g God. So by manifesting your reality, of taking something from potentiality into actuality, you can create reality. You can be a God. You can create things the way that God created things. Those are all the same sort of things that you're seeing kind of play out today.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do see that, and that was that sort of mysticism has been around since a long time. Like the
Mm.
Gnostics were really into that stuff too, and
Yep.
the idea of it's like almost like a kind of perversion of the Orthodox idea of Theotokos.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like the idea of like, because the Orthodox Christians believe you join with God at the end of life
Hmm.
and you become a part of God. So in the end, this is our journey to become God. But it's not really heretical in the sense that it's like you become God by joining with your creator. You commune with him at the end of your life.
Oh, theosis,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Theotokos is mother of God. Yeah,
the mother of God. Yeah.
yeah, theos. Yeah, Greek is not easy for me.
No,
But
no, it's good. I was thinking to myself, I was like, Theotokos. I was like, why does that sound right, but also not right at the same time? It's because it is a reference to the mother of God. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm just like learning some of these words for the first time this year. But
Yeah, they're not easy lingo kind of
yeah,
words. I'm actually newer to the Orthodox Catholic understanding of a lot of things as well. I mean, I've been kind of an Orthodox inquirer for a while, but I really fell in love with church history over the last couple of years, probably 4 or 5 years that I've been reading on my own. And like I said earlier in this chat, there's so much beauty to be gleaned from the history and the art from the Orthodox and the Catholic Church, especially when, and I don't want to speak ill of any. I mean, I am an evangelical Protestant Christian, but it
Sure.
does lack the beauty that I see that is so it's so common within like Catholics and Orthodox.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for a lot of Protestants,
Yep.
because I think they're doing a lot of the groundwork, you know, in terms of like some of the best missionaries that like bring people to God. It's like a lot of them are, American Protestants just going overseas and just getting their elbows dirty and stuff, and that's amazing. So when I first started like being like, okay, I think I do believe in God. Like this was like maybe a year or two ago, and I was like, okay, this is great. I'm going to start going to church again. I haven't been to church in like 20 years. And then the first one I went to was like an Episcopalian, and
Hmm.
they were incredibly nice people. Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
some of the sweetest human beings I've ever met. They were so welcoming, and they all had these beautiful smiling faces. They were so, however, while I love the people, I found and I don't want to anger any of my Episcopalian friends. I did find this particular church, their worship was, I mean, it just, for some reason, I didn't understand what was happening. I was like, this is not doing, like, why don't I feel what
Mm.
I want to feel from this? And then and then I went to a different one. I went to, not Episcopalian. There was another Protestant sect I went to, and then I was like, I'm getting the same feeling where I'm just like, did I make a
Anglican.
mistake? Yeah, it might have been Anglican. It might have been one of those. And then eventually, I actually went to a Catholic church by accident because I didn't realize it was right down the street from the Episcopalian church I was going to. So I brought
Hmm.
my wife. I brought my wife to some. She's Jewish, but she'll come with me to worship sometimes, just
Hmm.
like out of
Hmm.
And I brought her, and I ended up parking at the wrong one. That I was like, wait a minute, there's a Catholic church right here. And I walked in and I heard the music, and I looked at this church, and immediately I was like, oh, this is why I didn't feel it, because I was like, I was looking for this. I was looking for, because
Yeah.
I was a cradle Catholic. So I was like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, this is what I'm, at the very least, I'll be charitable and say, this is what I'm accustomed to.
Right, right. It's what you're born kind of into. And were you baptized as a baby?
Yeah, I was baptized Catholic. I went to
Yeah.
Catholic school growing up, and then I
Hmm.
went to college and became like really secular, and I was kind of fed a very narrow understanding of history, which like paints Christianity very negatively. And then like
Hmm.
as I started working on my King Arthur story and like
Hmm.
researching the Middle Ages, I was like, oh, the church actually did a lot of incredible things. And then I was like, I started
Yeah.
looking back into history, and I was like, oh, Christians have like kind of built Western civilization,
Yes.
and a lot
Yeah.
of the best things we have we owe to like people that we would consider religious fundamentalists. So maybe we should temper our criticism with an understanding of like how incredible some of these people were and the things that they did.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
you know,
well, people they always want to take things like so. Even the scientific method came about from the Christian world and understanding
yeah,
because the ancients actually used to believe that the world was chaotic, that order wasn't actually the norm. Therefore, there isn't purpose or reason to find order.
yeah,
But Christians were like, no, see, God is a God of order, and so they developed the scientific method to be able to be able to essentially understand how God's world and creation operates. But then, kick the ball several hundred years down the line. A lot of atheistic thought in school said, "We'll take that,"
yeah,
and it's like but the entire. I mean, it presupposes that they just presuppose their worldview of order without considering that it all comes from Christian ethics. And also on top of that, like hospitals, the idea of caring for the sick and the poor and the needy, without the theology of man being made in God's image, every person being made in God's image, everybody having the same intrinsic value as God's children. Without that sort of theology, there's no reason really to care for, somebody that's dying. There's no reason to care for the less fortunate than you, which is, all that Jesus talked about
yeah,
in the Gospels was about caring for the sick, the needy, the brokenhearted. That's the whole Beatitudes.
yeah. Well,
And
Broken Blade says it really well. He says even the concept that all humans have a right to basic dignity, like that was not,
yeah,
that was really not something that we had culturally
no,
before people started like looking to a creator. Like it's just not.
yeah,
It's really true. I mean, there's even like it's really interesting. So like the way that this is how, and it's funny how like God works, because I was pretty I was like really critical of religion for a long time, and then as I started working on the King Arthur story particularly and doing this history, this research, one of the things I discovered, which I didn't know, is that the King Arthur story predates Christianity. It's that old. And
oh really?
yeah, but the version of it that existed before the UK, like before England was Christian, was a very different version of Arthur.
Hmm.
So the original Sword in the Stone and like the Excalibur, all of these things, Arthur, the original vision of him that the pagans had who created the character, the Welsh, I think the pre-Christian like Welsh, maybe Celtic legend, was that he was a conqueror. And
Hmm.
like he was a blood drenched conqueror. He was a hero in the pre-Christian sense of being a hero because he's strong.
Yeah,
Like, when you think of like old stories of Hercules, you're like, wow, Hercules is kind of a dick. Like, Gilgamesh, all these guys who are like,
right.
they're so powerful. Look at how powerful they are. That's why they're cool. And a lot of the early stories is like Arthur, it's like these legends of him being like the round table, they're like terrifying. Like Merlin is like a mischievous, and Arthur is like a conqueror who's like, it's like, I don't know, it's like somewhere between Gilgamesh and Beowulf in terms of his morality.
That's like I mean, that has to have its origin in all of the mythos of the Greeks and the Egyptians. All of their mythology is that they're all like just kind of troublesome,
Mm-hmm.
you know, rulers, tyrants.
Yeah.
They're sort of full of they're full of so much fleshliness.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very, very capricious.
Yeah.
And then so essentially what happens, long story short, is that when Rome becomes Christian and then Christianity spreads to parts of Europe and the British Isles, and what essentially happens is a lot of the legends get remade by the later generations of Christians there. And then King Arthur suddenly goes from like questionable, conqueror hero to like binary morally good,
Yeah.
where like it's like his whole character changes, where now it's a story about he's destined to be king and wield Excalibur because he's a man of great vision and integrity, and like
Hmm.
because he protects the weak. And then it's like, oh whoops, you just created the first superhero. Because people will say, well, the first superhero really, it's like Hercules and Gilgamesh, but it's like, I beg to differ, because if you look at Gilgamesh in particular, their stories, it's like he's not a good guy. He actually creates a lot of the conflict that he solves with his strength. Like he literally just wants to fight, and he's really not even an anti-hero. In some of the stories, by our modern standards, he's a villain.
Mm. Yeah.
And so and then you look at what happens after Jesus is born, and then how stories change, and you're like, oh my goodness, our sense of what is even good is formed by by this dude, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, and like looking at that and realizing that the whole King Arthur story that I love is actually like purely because of a cultural influence from that came from, like, what the dissemination of Christianity by way of
Yeah.
the Roman Catholic tradition that eventually collapsed. And so anyways, I just thought that was really cool and interesting, and that was one of those things that made me be like, okay, I you know I think I've been very ignorant in my criticism of the church and like in Christianity. I think it's like much more complicated than just priest bad.
Yeah. Right.
You
Right.
know.
Well, and the funny thing is that's what you're saying isn't it's not unique just to from a secular university kind of standpoint. It's also true within a lot of Protestant. They don't seek to understand Catholic theology, Catholic history.
Yeah.
They kind of start at the Reformation in the 1500s, and that's where they go from there with theology. And then when I started to read Catholic history, I realized just how poorly represented a lot of my professors had. They just really poorly represented Catholic history, and that kind of like pained me because when I really delved in to understand uh, church history, Orthodox, Catholic, I was blown away at how much I agreed with it. You know?
Yeah, that's a common story. It's a common story these days. Yeah, because there were things like when I was dabbling in Protestantism, like initially, when I first came back, and I was like, man, like maybe my only issue with religion was like priests, and then I
Mm-hmm.
started looking at like, you and I talked about the Exorcist files,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was
Yep.
like, oh, according to like even some Protestants, they're saying that during exorcisms, that the demon only recognizes the authority of Catholic priests.
Yeah. So interesting, huh? Isn't that?
It's almost like they're like, even though they're flawed men, that they inherited a role from Saint Peter, that they like are granted authority, not perfection. They're granted authority, like
Right.
that they serve a role in the same way that a cop has authority. Like they're not
Yeah.
perfect people.
Right. Or like a malevolent president still wields that authority poorly. Let's say if there's a president that isn't a good president, he
Yeah,
still has the authority, even if he's a bad person. Let's say,
yeah,
so somebody could be the inheritor of an authority and not wield it well. I think that's what you get a lot in the Old Testament with a lot of the
yeah,
kings, the people that inherited the Israelite kingdom, where a lot of most of them were evil. you know.
yeah. Well, most rulers in history were evil. Like
Yeah.
the Roman Empire, man, holy crap! It was like every other emperor of Rome was like a psychopath.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, no, yeah, that was just something that really stuck with me of like, because it's like, okay, if you're gonna buy into the paranormal at all, as a lot of us have an interest in it, and you're gonna give it any credence, then you should try to listen to as much of it as you can. And the thing I kept coming across was that all of these demonic possession stories that I just find fascinating, that I get a lot of entertainment out of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm gonna, I'm buying into it to some extent, right? That ghosts are real or whatever. And in every single one of those stories, it was like the thing that they're encountering always seems to recognize the authority of a priest,
You're right.
which
Yeah.
is like really interesting to me because I was like, oh, so my understanding of like my critiques of the clergy can still be there. I can actually still have criticisms of the clergy and how they operate or things that they've done, and also recognize that if you're going to buy into the idea of God, that it's hard to avoid looking at the clergy as being like, well, they're like, they're people doing a job and they're granted authority to do that
Hmm.
job, even if sometimes they're really fucked up people.
Well, Christ said that there was going to be wolves in sheep's clothing. So why are we surprised when we find that?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, like why is that evidence of that it's not real, even when he's telling you it's real and this is going
Yeah.
to happen? you know?
Yeah. I had a mini argument once with my a mini argument with my uh, young adult pastor. And I was talking about the interesting case behind relics, and the power that they wield. And he kind of came back with like sort of this straw man idea or argument saying, well, don't you know all the abuses and whatnot, from around the 1200s up to the 1500s, or all of the papal abuses around relics and charging fees to go see them, and charging to get into heaven and stuff like that. And so, yeah, but the abuse of something doesn't mean that it
Yeah.
doesn't negate the reality of what's being abused.
Yeah, yeah, that's
If
not
anything,
that's not a
it
story.
authenticates it. You find forgeries about things that are usually real because it's understood that there's something valuable, real behind the thing, right? That's when you find forgeries.
Yeah, yeah, like the fact that counterfeit money exists does not mean now that money is inherently
Exactly.
not real. It's
Yeah.
like if
Right.
money didn't have a value that we all decided it had, then why would counterfeit money even be a problem?
Exactly. Yeah. So the reason people wanted to copy kind of these relics is because they all understood and realized that they were real and had power, and that there was value behind it. And not only that, but there's a lot of relics in the Bible. There's tons of examples of, like Paul's handkerchief in the New Testament was said to be able to cast out demons and stuff. Something that he had touched, which is considered to be a second degree relic. A first degree being a piece of like bone or hair or
Wow.
something from
Yeah.
the person. Second degree being something that they touched. And then I can't remember third degree. Maybe second degree was clothing, and then third degree was something that they had touched or been in contact with.
That's pretty
But
cool.
I remember Carlos Martins of the Exorcist Files. He was kind of laying out the levels that there are to these sort of things, and the interesting too. So Protestants they operate under what's called sola scriptura, which is that the
Hmm.
scriptures alone is my guiding principle, and I think that that is a true to the most like to being as gracious as I can. I do think that that is the best route to take. That the Bible should be your greatest authority, but the issue is the Bible doesn't tell you everything there is to know about the world. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't tell you um, about electricity and combustion engines and ufology and aliens and all of these things. Has given you the fullness of how to live a life of theosis, like we're saying.
Hmm.
If that's all you had, you could achieve an incredible sanctification through just reading the scripture, and that's the point of the scripture. That's actually the greatest thing you can do is live a moral life and become Christ-like, having the fruits of the Spirit, as Galatians 5 says. That is the main goal of all of our lives. But it doesn't give us, it doesn't tell you everything there is to know about everything. It's not a science book.
Yeah. No, and also, I mean, it's just interesting that you would, because even if you go to the Bible then sends you back toward church. It says like,
Exactly.
Christ
Yeah.
says like worship together. So
Yeah.
I gotta ask. So you said you were raised evangelical, right?
Yes. Non-denominational. Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially evangelical.
So would you? It sounds like you have an interest in the sort of ancient high church, a la Catholicism and Orthodoxy. Like,
Mhm.
what's going on there? How is that? How is that going for you as far as like a spiritual, intellectual pursuit? I'm interested in this because I'm going to be honest with you. I have encountered a number of Protestants that are expressing a growing interest in like
Mm.
Catholicism, which for
Yeah.
me is really new because growing up like I had this really funny thing happen. I know this is a long-winded question. I'm sorry, but I had
No.
this
It's
funny
good.
thing happen when I came back to God. Was that I started like the algorithms like, oh, you like Jesus? Here's everything about Jesus, and it's just like sending me all these videos. Like I'm getting a lot of Catholic videos and stuff, and like things
Yeah.
that were never on my feed before, which is like kind of fun. Some of it's garbage from like influencer accounts, and some of it's like really helpful,
Uh huh.
interesting stuff. One of the things I keep encountering is that there's this thing happening where not just that there's a lot of Protestants showing interest in Catholicism, but that
Hmm.
something I had no idea about was that Catholics were considered weird. And I didn't know at all because I grew up and I was like, oh, this is just what church is. Church is like singing ancient hymns and like everybody's praying and like, I believe it, like, and then I was
Hmm.
like listening to funny videos of Protestants talking about their first time at a Catholic mass, and they were like, when you first walk in, it's pretty freaking culty, and I was like, oh, that's so funny. Like I wasn't offended at all. I was like, this is fascinating because it was like, oh right, because Protestant worship is very different.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, the guy walks in, he's wearing this robe that's like from 1,000 years ago, and I was like, oh my goodness, you guys don't do that. I was like, your priest,
Right.
oh, your priest just dresses like a normal human being. That makes sense that other people wouldn't, but it's just like new
Well,
things happening in my
yeah.
head.
It almost looks like a corporate or almost business church in a way. A lot of American evangelicalism, the way that it operates, it's almost like it's more like not saying entirely, but
Yeah.
because I don't want to broad brush the entire evangelical church, but I am kind of seeing like it almost seems like there's more of a like it seems officey,
Yeah, I wouldn't. I wasn't going to say something that uncharitable. I mean, I guess you spent more time with it, so you can say that. I wouldn't want to. Me personally,
yeah.
saying
So
from the outside, I wouldn't
right,
want to say that about Protestants because I don't. I happen
right,
to like
right.
them, but yeah, go on.
Well, yeah, and I mean there's different levels of Protestant. I think I'm speaking more to like American evangelicalism,
Sure.
kind of, which is actually technically you could say is actually detached from traditional Protestantism that comes from Luther and
Hmm.
Calvin and Arminian. These are more traditional branches, like with the Anglicans and the Lutherans, especially Lutherans. It looks more Catholic than it does like an evangelical church. But the reason, probably one of the biggest things that got me thinking about it, was when I started to read the early church fathers. I realized that they do not sound in any way like your modern pastor. Your modern your modern non-denominational evangelical pastor. And when I started to read the accounts of Clement of Rome and Saint Ignatius of Antioch and
Thomas Aquinas, and yeah.
Yeah, so Thomas Aquinas was a little later. So these are guys that are within 200 years, 100 to 200 years of Christ. The early church fathers, the big three:
Mm-hmm.
Ignatius, Saint Clement, and there's one more. I'm forgetting his name. Polycarp, Bishop of Smyrna. When I was reading these accounts, I realized that there really is and these are the people that were disciples of the disciples. So like Polycarp and Clement knew John, the
Mm-hmm.
apostle of Christ,
Yeah.
personally. Like they knew him personally. Like, can you imagine? So
Well.
how much in Ignatius of Antioch there's a church history that says that he was one of when Christ said, "Let the children come to me," like don't hinder them.
Mm-hmm.
When the disciples wanted to keep them away, Christ said, "Let the children come to me." They'd run and they'd sit on Christ's lap, and he would speak with the kids, saying, "It's unto the little children that the kingdom of God is for," saying that if any man wants to enter the kingdom of heaven, he must become like a child in his heart. Speaking of our trust that we ought to have towards the Father, the way that a little kid entrusts himself to his father. And that church history says that Ignatius of Antioch was one of those kids and that's why he's called the God bearer, or he's somebody that saw God face to face in Christ. And when I was reading these accounts, one of the things that really struck me was the difference in understanding of the Eucharist and of real presence. It does seem to me like there was a much more sacrificial understanding to the presentation of the Eucharist at church, and
Mm-hmm.
so for the majority of the evangelicals, Baptist, kind of his stream of church holds a purely symbolic view of communion. And when I was reading, not just that, but you won't find a symbolic view until 1,500 years in the future at the Reformation. And even Martin Luther didn't believe in a symbolic. He believed in the real presence in the Eucharist and in the communion. And when I started to realize these things, I was like, my goodness, how is it that I feel like I have more, like my opinion is somehow better than the disciple of the apostles? Like somehow I got a more accurate view, 1,500 or 2,000 years removed from the fact, whereas they knew an apostle personally and they somehow messed it up, like.
Yeah, no, it's understandable to see how we got there, though. Considering early church corruption, you could imagine that because Protestants literally they're in protest of corruption. So
Right.
it's easy to see somebody start wanting to throw baby out with bathwater, especially how corrupt the church had gotten at that point. But I also just feel like there's so much good there that you don't want to you wouldn't want to lose. I agree with what you're saying. I do think that. And I think, Matt Froud?
Matt Fred, yeah.
Matt Fred. Yeah, not Fraud.
Fraud.
That's right. I'm sure people call him that when they're trolling him. Something he said, which is really funny, he was talking to a Protestant, and he was like, listen, Catholics we're okay with you criticizing us. We just wish you'd criticize us for things we actually do and not things that you made up. I was like, that's a really good way to put it. Because it's like the amount of times I've heard people say you're worshiping Mary. Like, I was like, that's not what they're doing, but all right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I remember I was kind of having a debate with my brother because I was talking about Orthodoxy, and he said, in Orthodox, they kiss icons. And he was saying that bowing and kissing icons is worship. And I'm like, okay, so when you kiss your wife, are you worshiping your wife? Like in the instances in the Bible where they bowed before a dignitary, are they worshiping the dignitary?
Well, I agree. Even to take it, in my opinion, one of the best possible and this is something that like I thought up, so it might be, I'm going to try this out on you and you can tell me if this is a good argument. But when people talk about how kissing icons is like, like a heretical worship of
Yeah.
like they're worshiping the object instead of Christ. I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, when a mother kisses a picture of her babies, do you think
Exactly.
she believes those are her actual babies, or do you think she kisses it as a gesture to reference her love of her children?
Right.
Like
Right.
that's literally what
Yep.
it is. Like when I pray the rosary and I kiss the cross, I don't think the cross is what gives me like clemency or power. Like
Right.
it's literally like it represents something I believe in, and it's an act of love that you hope God sees. You know,
Yeah.
it's not, but I get that Protestants. It's like if you've been fed this information, if you've been fed this misinformation about Catholics for like 15 generations, 100 generations, it's like you could imagine why they would have so much suspicion and criticism of it. Like because I don't blame Protestants for thinking these things. Like I really don't
Well,
have.
they just don't understand it. They've
Yeah,
never been exposed to the good arguments.
yeah. I don't
They've
have
been
that anger of
given
it. But yeah, go on,
right.
please.
But the ones that criticize it, and I have to defend Catholics a lot with my friends because I realize that I'm probably one of the only people that has taken the time to read and understand, historical
Mm-hmm.
these references and these ways of thinking. Because to think that if you took an ancient person, you put them in a non-denominational church and they would somehow be comfortable with that form of worship is just kind of naive.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Because ancient people, the way that they worshipped is not the same way that Baptists. And I'm not trying to dunk on Baptists. My brother is a Baptist pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying this because these are a lot of conversations that I've had, and I don't, like I said, I'm a little bit of I think outside of the box, and when I'm told to think a certain way and not to delve into a topic, I delve in,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then I
sure.
really try to understand it. And what I found is, yeah, there's a lot of nuance to some of these things, and also talking about, like with the rosary, I have this Orthodox rosary that I just got for Christmas that my wife got me.
Oh,
I've been
nice.
praying, yeah, I've been praying the Jesus prayer using it, and so what I've found is like the idea that God doesn't use material things for our betterment. The idea that God is solely interested in you doing, just interested in the spiritual, and He's not interested in the material, is a Gnostic idea. The Gnostics believed in the early church that the physical world was evil and the spiritual world was good. Therefore, the best thing that one could do is try to separate themselves from the spiritual or from the physical into the spiritual, and they would do that by withholding from themselves all
Mm.
of the material things that there were, essentially. And that was a heresy in the early church. And but when somebody wants to separate you from the physical vestments of worship, it's actually playing into a Gnostic strand of thinking. And God, when He required worship in the Old Testament, He didn't do that Himself. He desired to be worshipped through the incense in the temple, through the Ark of the Covenant, through the cherubim that were guarding the way of the Ark of the Covenant in the God's temple.
Yeah.
These are consistent biblical ideas. They just are.
Yeah.
And the fact that Christ has come and has become the fulfillment of all of that doesn't mean that those things are now bad.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's also just like, I mean, from as an artist myself, it's like, I love that saying, to sing well is to pray twice.
Yeah.
The idea that like, of why would God be offended by you making beautiful things that are meant to like signify,
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the aesthetics and the aura, to borrow from your generation, the aura of it might even be not even your generation, it might even be younger than Gen Z. It might be like Gen Alpha saying aura right now. But But the aura of Catholicism, the vibe of it, I think, is what a lot of people are getting brought into, because it's like, it's, Catholic, they're just so freaking beautiful. Like, they're
Right.
even in my little town in New York State,
Yeah.
it's just like,
Right.
so you walk in and you're like, you feel like you're in the presence of it. And maybe it's just a trick from really good artwork, but maybe it's something else. But I would, all of my Protestant friends who have expressed interest in Catholicism or Orthodoxy, where they're just like, there's something about it that they want to, and I would always say, just go to a Catholic mass,
Right.
just to see how you
Yeah.
feel. If you don't like it, don't do it, because I don't think I don't something I agree with the Orthodox about is that they're not as strictly legalistically salvific as the Catholics. Like, it seems to me that they're not like that. That they're not like, you got to, if you want to get into heaven, you got to stand on your head and turn around three
Right.
times,
Right.
and it's like, that's something that I think the Protestants are really right about, because it's like, and then maybe I'm a
Yeah.
heretic to the Catholics for saying this, but I don't care. Because if you believe any of the near-death experiences you and I were talking about from that book, thousands of near-death experiences of people who are encountering God, and it seems to conform somewhat to the somewhat Protestant idea of God, where it's like, it's not like if you don't do all the sacraments, God doesn't see you.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
people who hadn't been to church, and they're like, they're like encountering God and having a heavenly experience before they're brought back on the operating table. And the guy's like, there's stories of this one of the guys, and you can watch the interview. It's very
Yeah.
clear he's telling the truth. This man's
It's
not.
John Burke. John Burke is his
Thank
name.
you, John Burke. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's talking about all the corroboration and different stories of people that encounter God when they die and then come back, and he says that, like, all of them are corroborating the same experience of God as being they're like, God doesn't judge you at all. he's actually really encouraging. It's us judging ourselves. And like,
Yeah.
it's not
And
him sending us to hell. It's not this, like, it's like literally like hell is where we send ourselves when we make a series of terrible decisions.
yeah, and he does have stories of he shares about 20%, I think, of those near death experiences
Mm-hmm.
are terrifying experiences of going to
Yep.
a very dark, scary, horrible place. And near death experiences, I think, is a phenomena that is incredibly useful and powerful at getting people that, they don't know what to think about the Bible. Maybe it's a little bit more difficult to understand,
Mm-hmm.
or it seems a little bit strange. But there's a lot of peer-reviewed journal published work on near-death experiences from people that were clinically dead. Some of them for like 40 minutes.
Yep.
That is pretty much undeniable proof that there's that our consciousness extends after death.
Yeah. Yeah. And people like were able to prove that these were not just visions they had because they had a serotonin bust or something like that. It was literally like they were able to, in some cases with 100% accuracy, describe what was happening on the operating table when they were literally dead, and they were seeing it from above their body, and they were describing
Yeah.
what the doctors were doing. These are people with no medical background describing what the doctors are doing with 100% accuracy. Like, oh, he reached for this tool, he did this. A lady who floated out of her body when she was clinically dead described a red tag that was on the back of the vent above where they
Yeah.
were, and they open the vent and they look at it like, in the ceiling, and they're like, they can see the red tag on this thing. So like, people are, it's like they're telling the truth. And then those
Yeah.
same people are those same people who are not religious in many cases are like, I literally spoke to Jesus. Like, Jesus was literally there. He literally said he loved me. And then, like, I'm describing the way he looks, and it fits with his description of like 2,000 other people. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm bought in. I'm bought in. This is, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to have me argue with this. And a lot of these experiences that corroborate, I think, with what a lot of Protestants say, which is that, like, and there's so many different Protestant denominations that I'm not speaking for all of them, but this idea that, God is not a God of judgment. He's not there to condemn you. He's a God of love. And like, and sometimes I do think the Catholics have historically sometimes dipped into like damnation porn, where everything is like about the almost, it's like almost like when I say porn, it's like this idea of like obsessing over something to the point where you're like commodifying this notion of who gets into the club and who's not, which is like,
Yeah,
I,
checklist.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Well,
And I think that they view the sacraments that way sometimes. And I love the sacraments, but I don't think that that's a really good way to look at it.
right. Yeah, and two, I think while there's veneration that's due to Mary, sometimes it does merge into over veneration, and I think in some cases worshipful. I mean, there you have to qualify what one means by worship because there's different Greek words for it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's worship that's due to God alone, and then there's this sort of worship that you can give to like a rock star. Essentially, it's not the same sort of worship.
Yeah.
But I do think that Mary, there's kind of this, uh, there's kind of a tightrope balance that one has to walk with having a deep appreciation for the person that she was and the example that she is to the Christian, probably of all people, I would think to be the most sanctified human being that had ever existed, to be able to be worthy of carrying God
Yeah.
in human flesh. That's why she's called the mother of God, the Theotokos, is because she bore God. She's the new Ark of the Covenant, carrying God within her the same way that the law was carried in the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament. So there in the Israelites venerated the Ark of the Covenant, and so I think that there
Mm-hmm.
is consistency in some of this theology, but I think you have to be careful and not merge over too much into you know a worshipful state of her.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's like you got to see it as intercession, and that's the best way to look at it. Is like if you have a friend who's really holy and devout, you ask them to pray for you
Right.
because
Yeah.
you know that they're strong, and like
Yeah.
that's essentially the relationship with Mary is like, you know. But yeah, as a kid, even when I was like, you know, I had my negative feelings about church or whatever, I still love the idea that like when people, if you live a good life, when you die, you become a part of like God's, his elite, the saints and angels who like watch it's like a very corny idea, but it is comforting to think of like saints and angels who like participate in the story of the human race and that you can ask them for intercession, and I don't know if any of that's, necessarily true, but I think from an aesthetic standpoint, it makes for some beautiful church art,
Well, I think, the book of Hebrews, chapter 12 says we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. And you do get these instances in the book of Revelation where these spirits under the altar of God are asking the Lord, how long will our deaths go unavenged? And so that's almost like this intercessory, they have awareness of the events on the earth and they're kind of interceding. And then Revelation chapter 4, you get this image of 24 elders, and it's thought that this is human elders, 12 of the apostles and 12 of the Old Testament patriarchs of Israel's, of Jacob's sons. And so you get this imagery of this council that's interceding, making decisions on how the spiritual realm is going to help, the physical realm, let's speak. And so there is, it's not written verbatim that, okay, after you die, you're going to have some sort of role helping out in the physical realm. That's not written verbatim, but there is a lot of inferences in the scriptures of that. You have the Mount Transfiguration with Christ when he goes up on the mountain,
mm-hmm.
And he's glorified, and he's then seen with Elijah and Moses
Yeah.
up on the mountain, and he's speaking with them. And it's kind of this image of, if they're not aware of things going on the earth, why would they be there? Like what would the purpose of them
Yeah.
what are they talking about? It seems like they're planning like something,
Yeah. Almost like it's also interesting. At some point, Christ says to them, he who handles, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, he who handles his responsibilities well in this life will be given more responsibilities in the next.
Yeah, he'll be put over. You were good with what I gave you in the life. Now go. You'll be the overseer of 5 cities. Then he says to another person, you'll be the overseer of 10 cities. And I think that kind of goes into, I think, Old Testament theology of the principalities. So like the fallen angels they were kind of given dominion. That's from Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 32:8, what says that after the Tower of Babel, the fallen angels were given, they were allotted dominion over certain countries, areas, regions,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of the gods of the Old Testament, and that's also the gods of the Greeks, of the Romans. They're all sort of regionally responsible for X, Y, and Z. And then in Psalm 82, you get this imagery of God having this council, basically, and he's saying to these other little g gods that are just angels, he's saying, you guys aren't really ruling well. You guys are being kind of bad. You're not looking out for the downcast. You're sort of ruling. And that's kind of what you see, I think, with the Greeks' understanding of the gods were sort of selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that same sort of theology play out in Psalm 82. And then at the end of the Psalm, God says, you say you are gods, but ye shall die as men, and you shall be brought down to the dust as one of the as a mere mortal, essentially. And so, yeah. And then when you get to the New Testament, what Christ is doing is winning all that authority back to himself. He's taking the authority back
Mm-hmm.
away from these sons of God. And then what you see is within just 300 years, Jesus has essentially taken over the whole known world.
Yep.
The entire Roman Empire is Christianized, and he's capable of doing that because he's won all authority and power unto himself. That was the last thing that he said before he ascended. He said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given unto me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's so badass. It's so badass.
Yeah, well, it's so cool because, like I said, the Bible is a continuous narrative from beginning to end, from the book of Genesis, from the Tower of Babel, from the little g gods given, or fallen angels given their rulership over these territories. And then you see Christ when he's incarnate. What he's doing essentially is he's 1 John 3 says that Christ came to destroy the works of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the devil's workings is Jesus is regaining this authority, this rulership, this seat of David in the heavenly realms, essentially. And one of the things that Satan tempts him with in Matthew 4 is the worlds. He goes, when he's out in the desert 40 days, he's tempted, or he's let out there to be tempted by Satan. And one of the things that Satan tempts him with is, I'll give you all of the rulership of the world. I will. All you have to do is bow down and worship me, and all this can be yours. And the reason he's doing that is because Satan understands that that's what Christ is there for. He's there to win back the world, win back the nations to himself. And he says, no, I'm going to do it through my sacrifice, through my love, through my giving of myself. So after he dies, is crucified, resurrects, and ascends, it's then that he says, now I have all authority, go make disciples unto all the earth. And the earth essentially becomes Christianized. We're on an up trajectory, and it's pretty cool to see that Christianity has won the world. That Christ, this lowly carpenter, if you could call him that, if he was just some guy from Nazareth, how is it that he was able to predict with such accuracy?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I agree.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to jump in because it's like this. Sorry, you were finish your thought. Actually, I wanted to.
No,
he predicted with
that
accuracy. Go ahead.
That was my final thought. Yeah.
Okay.
That was good.
Yeah. I mean that because people will be like, well, I mean, like people, there's always the argument of like chronological snobbery. Well, people back then, they didn't know any better, and this guy was really charismatic, and that's how and it's like, well, that's not true. There were dozens of people alive at the same time as him that were claiming to be the Messiah. Like people don't realize that.
Right.
And all of them had little cults, and all of them died out once the guy died.
Right.
And then the only one that grew was this one, and it grew exponentially. Because he was witnessed after his crucifixion. And like, that's what made it that. And like, and I was talking to my wife. My wife is, like I said, she's Jewish. So she's never really delved into this. So she was asking me questions about it. I was explaining to her, cause she's like, she doesn't believe he's the Messiah. That's their tradition. She's like, but like, why would that be necessary for God to do that? Why would he need to do the whole crucifixion, suffering, and then ascension? I was like, well, the fact that it was so effective is almost proof of its necessity, right? Like
Right.
before that point, monotheism was like a sect among many others
Hmm. Hmm.
under the yoke of the Roman Empire. And then through this one action that he takes, it's like the only God that's literally proven that he existed by doing this. And
Well,
there's
he's
like,
single-handedly taking out all of the principalities, the deities,
yeah,
and that's what Paul says that in Second Corinthians, that at the cross he put to death the power of the
hmm,
principalities and the rulers of this archons of this age, and he dismantled their authority by the cross. That's what the Corinthians says. And so Paul understands this territorial theology, that what Jesus did, he did more than just die for our sins and resurrect, that one day we also might be partakers in the resurrection. That's 1 Corinthians 15, that talks about the resurrection of the bodies after one day. But there's so much more going on there. There's this incredible theme of conquerorship.
yeah.
It's incredible.
Well,
It's amazing.
it's also like it shows that throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, something that you can see that God keeps doing is he keeps destroying conventional wisdom. Like every
Hmm.
time people think they know how God's going to make himself known, he always does the most unexpected. You know what I mean? Everybody was expecting the Messiah to be like, he's going to ride on a golden horse and it's going to be like this, and instead he's just like literally a poor guy who says a bunch of controversial shit and then gets killed. And
Yeah. Right.
and then he's like almost like as a display of power, it's like I'm gonna die in the worst fucking way possible, and and you're gonna end up worshiping me afterwards because
Right.
like
Right.
that's it's like a display of power. It's like the most incredible like
Yeah.
no other conqueror in history has done it that way. Yeah, it confounds the wise. That's what also
Well,
Dan's in the chat. He says hi.
Yeah, yeah, I just saw that. Yeah, he said, "Yo, hey, Dan, good to see you,
Sorry,
man."
go ahead. What were you gonna say?
well, that's one of the things that the Romans couldn't wrap their head around, is
Yeah,
why somebody would want to worship a crucified God.
yeah,
Like, because crucifixion was the most humiliating thing possible for a Roman. It
yeah.
was, yeah, like you said, uh, Isaiah 55 says that my ways are not your ways, nor are my thoughts your thoughts. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so much higher are my ways than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. And like you said, he uses the foolish things of the world to put to shame those who think that they're wise.
Hmm.
That's Paul again. And I think that, and that's kind of like, God is humble. Christ is humble. He is the perfect embodiment of servanthood. He's like no other God that would come down and be manifested in. If Philippians 2 says that um, Jesus, while being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, but instead, being found in the likeness of man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. So Jesus, as God incarnate, is the perfect example of humility. And I think you get that sort of imagery with the manger as well. Like Christ's his incarnation and birth through Mary is this beautiful picture of servanthood, of humility, and
Hmm.
not being born in a palace, but rather in a manger.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think, like, you really don't get that sort of depth and beauty with any other religion.
I mean, yeah,
You know,
I can't say intelligently whether that's true because I've only ever known my religion.
right?
And I want to,
From what I've
yeah,
been
go
able to
ahead.
glean, at
Yeah,
least.
yeah. From like, well, I do think that, at the creation of, at the inception of Christianity, it's like the only religions that were, like people have talked about, people who converted from Islam to Christianity said that the quote that converted them was like listening to Jesus, where he says, come walk with me, my burden is light and my yoke is easy.
Right?
Like literally
Yeah.
saying like, don't worry so much, I'm here. And it's like there's no other conception of God that existed at that point that was like
Right.
that things are actually okay and that he's looking out for you. It's like every other thing was like, you're gonna go to hell, and instead Jesus
Yeah.
is like, he literally keeps telling people, don't worry. Like, don't worry. Think like
Yeah.
it's okay. I'm here. And it's like, it's literally like a dad talking to his kids and being like, Daddy's here. And it's like,
Right.
if you've never heard that before. Also, I wanted to say something to anyone in the chat who's like, maybe obviously hasn't read the same things we've read. One of the reasons that we're talking about this in a way of, in a manner that presupposes its historical certainty is because something that both David and I are familiar with is the history surrounding the crucifixion and the fact that it is a matter of like historical record, like written concurrently at the time that Jesus was seen after the crucifixion and witnessed by people. Like that is not, I mean, it's like there's some maybe wiggle room about whether or not it's true, but like the reason that we're talking about it this way and the reason that like researching this led me back to being Christian was because of the fact that there's like literally records you can find of Roman officials at that time being like, literally granting the presupposition that he's back from the dead, but being like, well, like one of them says, well, he was raised in Egypt and everybody knows Egyptians know magic, which is like hilarious to me. Like that everybody's like, okay, yeah, he cured the sick and he came back from the dead, but wasn't he from Egypt and aren't Egyptians like spooky? Like he's like, which is like, that's interesting for a number of reasons. One is that they're already granting the idea that he performed miracles and that he was seen after he died. Which is like
that was a common trope at the time, because he was a kind of a child in Egypt, that he would have learned some sort of mystical Egyptian arts, which also is kind of interesting that everybody just knew that Egypt was really woo woo. Like I'm reading this book right now, the myths and mythologies of ancient Egypt right now, and I mean, a lot of it is just like about the spells and the what we have in papyrus of the writings and what they were kind of able to do. I mean, ancient Egypt is just, it'll blow your mind with what they're capable of doing. But I think like you said, 1 Corinthians 15:6, that he says that he appeared to more than 500 brethren at once.
Yeah.
And Paul said some of them are still alive today, though some of them have fallen asleep or some of them have died. So Paul is even saying to the people that he's writing at Corinthians, he said, you can go talk to these people that saw him, especially after he died and resurrected.
Yeah, no, and how many of those people were like literally tortured to death by the Romans because they wouldn't deny that they saw him after he died. Like people don't get that people die for stupid religious fanaticism all the time, but in no other case in history have people been in a position to know if it was true or not because they were there. So like you can falsely believe that you're crashing a plane into a building because you're going to get 72 virgins like that. It's easy to mess with somebody's brain and make them think that, but it's not easy to have somebody be there and actually say whether or not they saw this guy after he died, and then they're not willing to deny it to the point that you burn them alive and they're like, I was there and I saw him and I don't care what you fucking do to me. That to me was like, I mean, like there's no other, can you think of any reason that they would do that? Like none whatsoever.
Well, there's a quote by Chuck Colson, who was involved in Watergate with Nixon. And one of the ways that he knew that the gospel was true was the fact that when they were interrogated about the Watergate, every single one of those guys fessed up to what had happened because they knew that they were trying to cover up something that was a lie.
Yeah.
And he said, there's no way after, people, and they folded within days. There's no way that somebody that knows, if they're trying to cover up for something that they know to be a lie, would keep the charade up. And all of them, none the fact, every single one of them, not one of them folded, and went to their death for it. Yeah. So it's just, I think there's so much to it. And when you really get down to it, that really authenticates it as being the truth.
Yeah, no, I mean, some of it is instinct and some of it is like data gathering.
Right.
But it's very hard to look at all this from like even a secular historical lens and not come away from it being like there's something to this. Like, I mean, so many, like The Case for Christ, all these books, or John Burke, you also mentioned, all these guys started as atheists, like hardcore atheists, like Lee Strobel hated the fucking church. He hated Christianity. He thought it was a waste of time. He was like, the whole reason he wrote the book initially was to disprove Christianity so he would get his wife to stop going to church and giving money to the church, which is really funny. And then by the end of the book, after research, this is a crime journalist, by the way. This is a guy who's used to looking at data and facts and trying to disprove theories. And by the end of it, he was like, there's no way that this is not true. Like, by every metric that we evaluate truth, both historically and currently, this has to have happened. He's like, there's too many witnesses. There's too much corroborating data. There's too much like Bible passages that line up with actual history outside of the Bible. Like Broken Blade just said, the scripture also speaks of the sun turning black and the ground shaking at the time of his death. And Roman historians have records of a solar eclipse and an earthquake at the time of his death. Yeah, it's like, it's full of stuff like that that'll blow people's minds, where you're just like, there's no way that, you know, even in the way that the Old Testament telegraphs the arrival of Christ 4,000 years before he's born, and they're talking about him like it's like every trope we have of prophecy and fantasy novels, like so much of it is just us reinterpreting and rewriting the Christ legend, because it's almost like, in my opinion, I think some part of us all intrinsically knows that it happened. You know, even if people say that's not what it is, but I think that's what it is. Sorry, go on.
Well, I think that's what you get in all the films. It's literally just doing its best to copy the most greatest historical fact that's ever happened, and that was in like, you get that with like you know, kind of like the Superman with Doomsday kind of dying and resurrecting. I mean, it's just straight up plagiarizing the Christian story, and it's the same thing I remember in Thor. There's kind of that scene in the first Thor movie, which is interesting. The Son of God, you know, Thor, the son of God, dies and resurrects, comes back to life. You get that in Dune. I saw that in Dune, where the main character dies and, you know, resurrects, and is the Messiah figure. But it's all Christological.
What's interesting about Dune, though, is that Paul Atreides is definitely a combination of Christ and Muhammad.
Yeah,
because he's very much a conqueror.
The Mahdi, which is the Messiah for the Muslims or Islam.
Well, it's like he's almost an antichrist, Paul, because he comes back from the dead, from the edge of death, but instead of coming back with a new level of divinity like Gandalf the White, rather he's a much darker, more chaotic version of what he was. Almost like he came back wrong, which is really interesting. I think the best Christ allegory in art, I think, is probably Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's just, they captured it. He captures it in a way that's like, you don't even notice that he's doing it.
Right. I think, and that's kind of Tolkien-esque. He wasn't as obvious or in your face as like C.S. Lewis was.
Yeah, well, that's apparently something that they fought about. Are you aware of this story? They didn't talk for years, apparently, because they got into a huge argument because Tolkien was so annoyed at C.S. Lewis using Santa Claus in his book.
I didn't know it was over that, but
I think that's might have been what it is. Yeah,
I knew they had like a fundamental disagreement on how obvious, I guess, one should be with their parallels or allegories. Yeah, it's pretty funny. You know, interesting. You know what you're saying with the so you have a lot of passages in the Old Testament that written, you know, several hundreds of years, even 1,000 years before the hand, talk about Christ, the nature of the crucifixion. Like Psalm 22, it says they pierced my hands and my feet, you know, and they cast lots, or they cast lots for my garments. You know, speaking of when the soldiers divvied up his garment, you have things with such specificity of that, especially during David's time when crucifixion hadn't even been invented yet. Yeah. So nobody would have thought of the piercing of the hands and the feet as being somebody being crucified in the future. And then you also have, you know, Isaiah 7:14, that says that the virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. So this virgin is going to give birth to God with us, with humankind. Going back to the virgin birth, like we said earlier in the stream, Genesis 3:15, the seed of the women will crush the head of the serpent.
Yeah.
Speaking of Christ's crushing nature, the virgin birth, the seed of the woman crushing the Satan at the cross.
Mm-hmm.
You have Isaiah 9 that says that unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of rulership, there will be no end. Which is, it says that the child is going to be born, and his name is going to be called Mighty God. So how is a child going to be named Mighty God?
Yeah.
These are all incarnation. These are all elements of the incarnation.
Yeah.
You have all of these things written by people that didn't know each other. And, even the place of his birth, that's Micah 5:2 that says, Bethlehem, unto you, it shall be, it basically says that the Messiah would be coming from Bethlehem, which was Micah 5:2. So there's so many of these verses elements, that point to Christ so undeniably. So that, and then you have all of those elements like we were talking about with the historicity of the crucifixion. So you add all of these things up layer after layer after layer, and it's just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with that, and I think someone like you. I was talking to Dan about this, about how everybody who's ever even brushed up against Christianity should go to Italy and see the Vatican.
Yes, yeah. I was just there in March on my way to Egypt.
Oh, cool. Oh, so
Yeah.
you've been there. So yeah, how did that feel?
It was incredible. The issue is I hadn't slept all night on the plane, and
Yep.
so I was a little bit I was a little bit
Yeah, delirious, I would imagine.
oh my, yeah, I wish I had enough sleep to really take in what I was seeing, but we were just it was just a layover on our way to Cairo. So, but it was
That's
amazing.
cool. Yeah, we actually, my wife and I had the same experience.
Really?
Our flight was delayed, and when because our flight was delayed dude, we had a crazy thing. We got snowed out, and then we had to but we realized we were going to miss our connecting flight to which was like, yeah, I forgot how it worked, I forgot what the initial problem was, but we ended up having to take this emergency flight. We had to drive an hour to another airport, which the airport paid for because they were like, it's our fault. So
Yeah.
and then we ended up catching a flight to Germany and got a layover after 10 minutes from Germany to Italy, which was not the initial plan. And it was the craziest thing, that like my first time in Europe ever in my life was just being at an airport in Berlin and just seeing Germans in their natural habitat for the first time and being like, what? And it was like, I'm on like 2 hours of sleep and I'm like, what is even happening? I'm in Europe. Like, what the fuck? And then like another hour and a half later, and it's like, okay, now you're in the Vatican. It's like, oh my God, what is happening? And I was so tripped out and tired and sort of spooked. Like my reptile brain was like, I'm on a different continent. This is not supposed, like, where's my bed, But then I'm walking around and it's like, oh, that's a sculpture on the side of the street in a street in Rome. There's just a sculpture and it's like 800 years old. It's like
incredible. Yeah. Incredible.
Or more than that. Some of that stuff is there like before Christ, and you're like, what is this? Like, where am I? But yeah, the Vatican walking around. In fact, being exhausted almost made it more incredible because you're like kind of losing your mind anyway.
Yeah, it's almost like out of body.
But I'm curious about you and your experience with this. Oh, well, let me quick address the chat. Hey, what's up, Jacoby wants to know, are we fans of the Gnostic Gospel? I don't know much about it. The Gospel of Thomas, anybody?
Well, I will say a lot of those, the Gnostic Gospels and the Gnostic writings, we know with a lot of certainty that they come, multiple centuries after Christ.
Yeah.
And essentially what those accounts are is biblical fan fiction. So it wasn't uncommon for people at the time to kind of plagiarize off of the authentic works that were passed around and held to be authoritative. But people did write kind of like fan fiction off of that, and they would kind of plagiarize. So some of what you're seeing, and they're usually multiple centuries after, 300-400s after the fact. So a lot of those works, while interesting, are pretty much known with pretty good amount of certainty to just be biblical fan fiction.
When David says that, can you see him smoking his pipe and like adjusting his tweed jacket in judgment of you?
I think they're definitely interesting, worth studying. And some of these accounts we know are a lot older, because I think one of them quotes Dante's Inferno, which is much later. It's so the way that you can judge periodically when these are writing is if they're playing off of or taking off of other writing at the time, like Dante's Inferno.
Dante's Inferno is pretty interesting just as a side note, because I appreciated it as a work of fiction, but also like it's kind of a hilarious, like unintentionally hilarious, how much of his vision of hell is just full of people that wronged him personally. It's so funny how he's like, yeah, and also that guy never paid me back the $5 he owed me. He's in hell too. Look at him. He's right there. I'm definitely not writing this angry. But Pope Leo's on the phone, and he asked me a question. He wanted me to ask you tonight. Pope Leo wants to know, are you considering conversion to Catholicism, or do you think you'll always be appreciating it from the outside?
I think I'm more inclined towards Orthodox Christianity than I am towards Catholic Christianity. And I think the reason is because I do think that the early church operated in a less concentration of power towards the seat of Peter. I think that there was a natural reverence for the seat of Peter in the papacy in the early church, but I think that the way Catholic history kind of plays out is they did kind of claim to have more authority than was present in the early church. And because I do think so, the Orthodox kind of says like, yeah, the Pope Peter, the seat of Peter was kind of the first amongst equals. But the authority of the other churches could override the opinion of the papal seat. Whereas now a pope can kind of claim, he can make a statement ex cathedra that's binding on the entire church. And I don't think you see that sort of function in the first, 4, 5, 6 centuries of Christianity. There needed to be a council called. And I think that, one of the first councils or second or third council, the Council of Nicaea in 320s, after the Edict of Milan legalized Christianity, the Pope actually wasn't able to make it, and they were able to make binding decrees about Christian doctrine on the entire church without the Pope being present.
Yeah.
So that kind of puts you in a mindset of how they viewed the papal seat. But I think that there are elements where I think that the Pope has more power than was originally necessary. And I think what I appreciate mostly about Orthodoxy is they tried not to change things as much as they could. Whereas the Catholicism views its ability to adjust theology as being something they can do whenever. And I think you get a lot of modern problems with Vatican II.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you get a lot of incorrect theology with Vatican II, in my opinion. And I don't see those sort of pitfalls as being as serious with like Orthodox Christianity. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. Yeah, I'm interested in this because I've been getting really interested in Orthodoxy largely because of the videos of a channel called Harmony, which
I love harmony.
dude, anybody watching this, I don't care if you're religious or not, anybody watching this, watch Harmony.
It's so beautiful. Yeah.
It's some of the most incredibly well edited videos on YouTube. It is so pristine and cinematic. And it's basically this incredible filmmaker making short films about orthodoxy, the mysticism of it, the art, the stories. He'll just tell random stories. They're beautifully written, edited. The music is gorgeous. He'll have these like incredible edits where he'll just suddenly cut to somebody doing woodwork, and you'll watch them make a religious icon out of like, you know, this beautiful old Byzantine artistic process. And then he'll just go right back to the video without any explanation, just showing you something amazing. It's so good. It's relaxing. It's meditative.
Yeah. I love harmony stuff. Yeah. I think it's incredible.
Yeah.
So I do think that the form of ancient Christianity is most accurately preserved in Orthodoxy.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So for that reason, I will always have a great appreciation for Catholicism and the Western understanding of kind of how church authority develops. Not to say that I don't think there's development. I do think there is, but I have a hard time with like certain 20th century doctrines, like the Assumption of Mary, you know, being so new, but it being a binding decree on the church. I struggle with that, with seeing the continuity in that.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I don't really have super well-formed opinions on that.
I'm sure but I would also say, to steelman that position, if anybody was going to be assumed into heaven, it would have been Mary.
Yeah.
And we know that Elijah was assumed into heaven, so it's really not that crazy to think that it very well could have happened. I don't find an issue with that. Also, we have no veneration place of her death, I don't think.
Yeah.
Which is something that we have of a lot of the other apostles in places. So it is kind of odd that she isn't, her resting place isn't venerated anywhere. But I do think that I have a hard time with seeing something so removed from the fact as not having some sort of historical accretion over the years.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Because I always took it for granted. I grew up hearing that stuff, and then I didn't realize that was actually like a later church teaching.
Mm-hmm. But it's still interesting. I still think it's worth thinking about, worth pondering and giving credence to. You know, but that's what I say is usually, if anybody was going to be assumed into heaven, it would have been her.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I agree. I mean, well, listen, maybe on that note, we should cut it for the night. What do you think?
Yeah. I still have a little bit of homework I got to do. No problem.
You're so damn young. You have to stop to do homework. I have to stop to take my blood pressure medication.
Yeah, but I was extremely invested in this conversation. It's not something I get to kind of free flow talk about on pretty much hit every, you know, kind of topic or subject, and you kind of just scratched the surface of a lot of it though. But it was thank you so much for having me on. It was really an awesome conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, listen, I had a great time. You're welcome back anytime you want. The big draw is kind of this thing where people just come in, and then if they enjoy it, they can just call me anytime I'm streaming and hop on. That's awesome. Before you leave though, please plug your channel, plug everything.
Thanks, man. Yeah, just a small channel called Rennaisance Ministries with David Erwin. I'm just kind of going through different church history stuff, some of the kind of reading between the lines of certain passages and some of the history that you probably won't get at your average church. So, yeah, other than that.
Yeah. Well,
I appreciate it. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, of course, man. God bless you. This was a lot of fun.
You too. That was fun.
Hopefully we'll meet up again in person at Dan's place, and we'll share a chicken leg or a pork belly of some kind.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to come during the harvest and check it out in person.
Yeah. Before you go real quick, please let me know when you're doing the cranberry harvest, because Malka is obsessed with it and she keeps missing it, and she really wants to come to watch the cranberry harvest.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, mid-September is when we start harvest, and it runs mid-September all the way till the beginning of November. So
Okay.
that's when we harvest every single year. So you have to come during that time.
Awesome. Yeah, because she even was like, if they taught me how to harvest cranberries, I would just help them with the harvest, like literally for free. She's like, I would just do it because it looks so cool.
Yeah.
That's my wife.
I'm sure she'd do an awesome job.
Yeah, she's a worker.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I love you. I'll talk to you next time. All right, man.
I love you too, brother. Thank you for talking. It was awesome.
Later, bud.
Later. Bye.
Great stream. Thanks for the Bible study. Yeah, listen, I it's always fun when that happens, because like he and I both, like, we connected on our religion, but that was not necessarily what we like thought we were. I was like, oh, because if you look at his channel, he's got a lot of Bible stuff. He's got a lot of alien stuff. He's a really interesting guy. So I was like, oh, Dave will, I know that whatever he talks about won't be boring. And before we went on, I was like, yeah, we can stay out of politics. Generally, we both agreed. We don't want to talk politics, but like religion is fine for some reason. I don't know. I guess because it's like, neither one of us wants to like not be who we are, But then I didn't know it was going to be us talking about the Bible for 2.5 hours, and I do not regret it. That was a lot of fun, because I don't really have too many people that I talk to about this. My wife and I read the Bible together, but we're two different religions, so we talk about it from this like third standpoint, kind of looking at it as like, what do you think? What do I think? But she's also like not as into the esoteric like secret conspiracy theory stuff as I am. So Dave is right up my alley with that stuff. So what do you guys think? Do you guys like him? I really like Dave. I'm sure he made a pretty good impression on all y'all. He's a nice enough guy. I liked him a lot. He's like I said, I met him at one of Dan's like dinner parties, and he was just sitting across from me, and he said one thing about aliens or something, and he and I just started talking, and then it became one of those things where like everybody else is having their party and talking and doing their things, and they're breaking off into groups. And I just like abandoned my wife to talk to Dave, for like 2 hours. And she's cool with that. She knows what's happening when I'm in a room full of people like that if I find someone with overlapping interests, I'll just dive in. Yeah, he's a knowledgeable guy. He knows a lot more than I do, for sure. My strength has never been with information. My strength has always been with rhetoric. I'm good at talking about things, not knowing things. But anyways, guys, I'm really glad you had a good time. So did I. We just hit 3 hours. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out. I love you. I'll catch you next time. My wife is on a trip until like Tuesday. She's like just gone this whole week. So I will probably stream a few times, because it's like, what am I going to do with myself? I'm going to work and I'm going to stream. And I was going to exercise, but I didn't do that the past 3 days because I've been pooping, just peeing out my butt for days with my food poisoning. So I'm not really eating that much. So I'm not eating. That saves time. I'm not cooking meals. No, I'm having like one meal a day, really, because it's all my stomach can handle. Thanks a lot, unnamed Thai restaurant in Massachusetts. You're helping me do my fast. You're kind of bummed he's not into the Gnostic Gospels. Well, you and I can talk about that, Jacoby. I'm open to it. Okay, yeah, that's it. Good night, Dan. If you're watching, I know you were in the chat earlier. You're probably gone now, but thanks for tuning in. Hopefully, Dan and I can do a big draw soon. Oh, the mic. And good night, guys. Later, Lone Wolf. Later, BB. Johnny Pearson, if you're around. Jacobo.